This is the son of Dave Kersey. Don't have a heart attack, people out there, folks. This is the son. This is not the actual psychologist, but he still knows a lot. So over to Christen and Sabrina will be presenting this, and we'll have comments and questions from Dave and Jonathan as we go through. Over to Sabrina and Christen.
All right, okay. So we're going to run through a quick overview of all the 9 types on the Enneagram, and we've identified some learning styles. Hopefully we'll get input from Jonathan, since he's our kind of Enneagram expert. Sabrina has a lot of experience in school systems and some data to tie into all of this. So to kick it off, and to say too that we're going by sections. So 8, 9, 1 being in a group together, and 2, 3, 4. So we start off with, I think we have 2 first. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sabrina, you put this together. You want to share this one?
Okay. The first type that we're going to talk about is the helper, and you would recognize this student as a compassionate, caring student who definitely wants to be of service to the classroom, to their peers, and to their teachers. And just to give you a little bit of idea of the mindset, we've got a quote on each of the introductory slides, so I'll go ahead and I'll read that. When you focus on making a difference in other people's lives, your life is the one that most improves. Now, their core desire is to be loved and wanted, and their core fear, well, of course, is the opposite, is being unloved and unwanted. Okay.
So looking at in the classroom, and Jonathan, feel free to jump in on some of the details here. We pulled up their learning styles and their ideal classroom, and this one was really interesting to me when I was going through my tutoring notes and trying to recognize students that were really looking for an emotional connection with me, and that heavily based their learning experience. Because it seems like that's important to a lot of people. So to single out, like, for which students was that most important was a bit. Jonathan, what do you think about the learning and ideal classroom outline on this one?
Let's see. Help. Yeah, the 2 really wants to be of help, and it would really appreciate if the teacher liked their help, and if the other children liked their help as well. Top was a group 1 discussion. Yeah, so if we go to the Myers-Briggs types, the type 2 is usually the ESFJs, the ENFJs, sometimes the ENFPs and ESFPs, and INFJs and ISFJs. Basically all of the feeling types except for the INFP and ISFP tend to, the 2 is likely to be any of the feeling types except for the ISFP and the INFP, because they're focused on other people's feelings and caring for other people's feelings. So and on being appreciated for focusing on it, on getting positive feedback of it. They like being told, thank you, you're a good person, I appreciate that. All the image types, 2, 3, and 4, they all like having the image they're trying to present be reciprocated, and they like being told at least 3 times a day that the image they're trying to present is being seen. So 2s like to be told that they're helpful, that they're generous, that they're kind, that they're appreciated, and so on. And that's what motivates them in almost everything they do. So yes, this is
definitely more of like an extrinsically motivated student looking directly for feedback from the teacher.
Yeah, even if they're an introvert, they'll still be an extroverted introvert as far as interpersonal interaction goes. And you'll even see that in how they dress sometimes. Like all the image types are kind of, they can focus on their clothes. It varies somewhat, but they usually pay attention to their clothes, and they can feel like, all the image types can feel like they're actually a different person just by changing their clothes, like they're putting on a different mask. But the two's image is that of the generous, charitable person, or whatever. Now the instincts will vary. So the social, sexual, self-pres, that's a different thing. We're not talking about it today. But generally speaking, they want to be seen as kind, helpful, generous, thoughtful, whatever that means to them.
Jonathan, as you're describing it, I'm realizing that with one-on-one tutoring, this may not have stood out to me as much because it's only one-on-one. So as much as they're responding a lot to my positive feedback, they don't necessarily have that group appearance with their peers. And there were a couple students that I would overlap their tutoring sessions by like 10 or so minutes for something like presenting a piece of their work or having a peer read their paper for them or something like that. And there were a handful of students that opened up a lot to that, being able to get positive feedback from more than just me, from then having someone else new to also show it to.
Yeah, there's a few different types that could do that. That's not necessarily a type thing. There's other things. Some twos do prefer the one-on-one helping, particularly the sexual twos, and the social twos will be more group-oriented. So, again, that's where we're not talking about the instinctual subtypes today, but that's another factor that will come in.
Yeah, because they're not the INFPs and ISFPs. Basically, this excludes them to a large degree, and they're more individual. Yeah. They're more individual.
Well, no, there are individualistic twos, but even those individualistic twos are not going to be. I don't expect them to be INFPs or INFJs.
Right.
There's a lot of. You have to imagine a Venn diagram when it comes to comparing one model to another. There's going to be degrees of overlap.
Right.
Okay. One of the things that I
Hello?
We lost her.
Oh,
oops.
She froze on us.
Maybe she comes back. Oh, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back. It's just a little hiccup. Yeah, one of the things that I want to mention about Hattie's research is that we have listed in the presentation strategies or techniques that are research-based to be visually effective in the classroom. And that was measured by looking at over 800 meta-studies on education and practices that work that also involved pre-test, post-test data. And there was they've looked for, we look for a Cohen's D effect size of 0.4 or better. And everything that you see listed there falls in that category. And listening to the conversation, you can definitely tell, as Hattie's research implies, that the student-teacher relationships, which for all students are important, but especially are important for these students. Classroom discussion where you can get that interaction. And then these are the students that will openly seek help versus trying to do it on their own first. And so, go ahead.
Well, the type 2 won't seek help. The type 2 will seek to give help.
To give help, yeah. Ah, okay.
That's different. I mean, the type 2 can see, everyone can seek help, obviously, but type 2 is really hoping to give help, to be helpful, to be of service.
Now, would you not think that they would also be willing to ask for help? Because you definitely have some types that are going to look for help.
Yeah, but the types that keep asking for help, if someone keeps asking for help, I would expect that to be a 6, a more phobic 6, or maybe a 9, or whatever. Obviously, everyone can ask for help if they don't understand what's going on, but I'm not saying 2s won't ask for help, but generally what they're after is not to get help, is to be of help. 2s actually like to see themselves as self-sufficient, and they have an abundance of love, and that they don't need others, others need them, and others need them for their generosity and their kindness.
So maybe like mentoring a younger student or another student who maybe has a lower grade. I've seen that especially in high schools done sometimes.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah, peer mentoring can be for some.
Another thing to consider is that every type can be anti-intellectual in some way. Even the types that consider themselves really intellectual, they can all have an anti-intellectual bias in some way. The 2s, with type 2s, a lot of 2s will not want to help not want to do anything on their own, even if it's for their own benefit or their own intellectual advancement. They need, if that means tearing themselves away from their friends. So I'm trying to remember, there was an example Catherine Favre, of a 2 with 5 in their tri-type, and they worked in an office or something, and they were doing a really good job, and they were offered a promotion or whatever, and they said no because the promotion would take them away from their friends. Even though they're very smart. So even a very smart 2 will won't want to be taken away from the people they're trying to help. Now, again, this will vary somewhat by subtype. Like a social 2 will be more advanced oriented, but 2s don't necessarily, no matter how smart they are, you can see this tendency to put that aside for the sake of making others feel good. But if you think of a stereotypical ENFJ or ESFJ, whatever, no matter how smart they are, they can sometimes say things that aren't necessarily true or not necessarily accurate or logical for the sake of helping or making others, giving others positive feelings.
Definitely makes you a little, you probably have to I hate to say save these children from themselves, but help them recognize that sometimes self-help is just as important as helping others.
Yeah, that's a good thing for a 2 to learn. Yeah.
All right, on to the 3, the achiever.
Okay. The achiever. Success is a little like wrestling a gorilla. You don't quit when you're tired. You quit when the gorilla is tired. Now, the achiever is positive, charismatic, and most of all, competitive. Now, for them, their greatest fear is, or I should say their core desire is being valuable and successful, and they fear being worthless or being a failure.
Well,
yes.
I would say being seen as valuable and successful.
Seen as valuable?
Yeah. Again, 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4 are all about the image.
Now,
they'll all want substance to that image, so unless they're very unhealthy, but the image is important.
And I think that fits into some of what we said here, like under ideal classroom, a visible reward system. When you mentioned that seen as.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Also, just word to the wise: do not wrestle a gorilla; you will die. A gorilla will kill you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I had one student stand out to me quite a bit under the achiever. It was a student who I had tutored at a pretty young age for like pre-ACT prep. And then he did very well. And when it came time to decided to do the SAT also, did really well and was going after a perfect score. So he had just was pushing and doing every test imaginable. And he was finding exams online and in books that I didn't know existed. And then coming to me with some pretty specific questions. And he wanted it just for like the sake of achieving it. He's like, I think I can do this if I set my mind to it. And
well, was it for the sake of achieving it, or was it for the sake of being seen as achieving it? Because that was slightly different. Well,
it was a bragging right.
It could be obviously tri-type could be both, but yeah. The thing with the 3s are type 3 children. Again, I'll go back to Catherine. I'll just keep referencing what she said. She had a friend in school who always got A's and stuff, and one day she got an A, and Catherine said, "Well, I bet you're just bored with getting all these A's and stuff." And the friend was mortified, like, "What? No, I need this. I need this feedback. I need to know that I'm doing well." So the 3s like the reward system. They like the positive feedback that they're a winner, that they're being successful. They don't feel loved if they aren't seen that way.
Right, that's the promoter. The promoter,
yeah,
right?
Also, well, yeah, like type 3s, type 3s will see emotions as speed bumps to get in the way of success. So they tend to be logical extroverts. So the ENTJ, the ESTP, the ESTJ.
Right.
Those are usually, sometimes possibly the ESFP, but generally the logical extroverts. And as far as tri-type goes, any logical type could have 3 in the tri-type. Oh, what's that? Oh, Ben. So with the 3s, they like, as I said, the image types like the positive feedback, they like the words. So the 3s like to be told at least 3 times a day that they're a winner, that they're successful, that they're efficient, they're competent, all those things. That's another thing with 3s, it's efficiency, competency. The 3s are 1, 3, and 5 are competent types, and the 3 is really after the image of competency, the appearance of being efficient, so they can actually cut corners for the sake of looking good.
I have a question along that line then on some of the wording that we pulled here, like desire to improve skill. So it's not necessarily is it an inner desire?
It's a desire to have the image of being really skillful and being really able. Now, if they're healthy, that image will have a ton of substance. They will be as good as they look. If they're less healthy, then the less healthy a 3 is, the more deceit will come in. A lot of con artists will be 3s or have 3 in the tri-type. A lot of people who look like they're doing a lot better than they are will be like that.
Yeah. The promoter con man is the bad man.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the film The Stepfather? It's more of a kind of an independent horror film, but the main character is a self-pres 3. He's played by Terry O'Quinn from Lost. He's an ESTJ, I would say, he's a very unhealthy type 3. He kills his entire family, then leaves, then finds another family, and has a new identity, and lives with them for a while. When they find him out, he kills them, and he moves on, rinse and repeat. Eventually, at one point of the film, he's he's arguing with someone, and then he says, "Wait a minute, who am I here?" And that's what the 3s are always asking: who am I at this moment? Who am I pretending to be at that time? The 3s of all the types, period, identify with wearing a mask. They are who they appear to be. They are what they do. So even if they've got a job, for example, very often, no matter how good they are at their job, what matters is the positive feedback from the job. The job itself might not matter so much. It's they have a hard time distinguishing between what they're really good at and the feedback they're getting for what they're good at. Does that make sense? Understand?
Yeah. Depending on temperament. Yeah. So of course, the temperament is really important.
Yeah.
Sabrina, can you speak to the Piaget Programs? I think I pronounced it wrong. You mentioned it last time we talked, and I forgot.
Oh, the Piagetian program? Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess, I'm not sure, can you send me in here twice? I actually came in on the cell because I was running into problems.
Well, we see you. There's only one image now.
Yeah. Okay, a Piagetian program is based on the work of Jean Piaget, who is, I guess you could say, the father of early childhood education, or at least that's how we saw him.
Yes.
Everything starts off with very pre-operational or concrete experiences, much like Dave had mentioned earlier, where in elementary school we start off with the concrete and then move up to the abstract. Piagetian programs will take the children where they are for any given skill and start them there versus, okay, this is versus looking at the structure of the discipline for what you're teaching. It's actually looking at where that child is developmentally and making adjustments in order to teach them accordingly.
Right.
All right.
So sort of Piaget, and then also I can't remember. The teacher, who's the teacher? I'll figure it out.
Montessori.
Montessori, exactly.
Maria Montessori.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, with a type 3 student, you would need to give them the positive feedback, whatever they're doing. The other thing is, 3s will want to avoid things they know they're not good at. So if a 3 is really good at sports, but not doing very well academically, they'll want to focus a lot more on sports, because that's where all their positive feedback is getting. So you might need to encourage them to see that as a good thing to have, to be good at academically. But they can work really, really hard at whatever they do. Once they think they're getting positive feedback for something, they will work really, really hard at it to keep getting it.
Yep.
The other thing I should have mentioned is Hornevians and harmonics. So type 2s are, so back to type 2s. Type 2s are compliant and positive types. Compliant means rule bound, and that means they like to earn whatever it is. If they want something, they feel like they have to earn it, and they can have the guilt around not earning it, or about breaking the rules and so on, or being unethical or being immoral. Type 3s are assertive. Type 3s identify what they want and they pursue it. There's not so much guilt associated with that. There is shame, which is different. Shame is about how you're seen, but they're much more the ego that sides with the id, if you're thinking Freudian terms. So it's more about, they don't always have any hang-ups about denying themselves. 3, 7, and 8, none of them have hang-ups about denying themselves something, and they tend to assume that everyone else is like that as well, or should be. So it's a sort of innocent selfishness.
Yeah.
So 3s are assertive and competent, and competent means they are emotionally neutral. They try to be emotionally neutral. They try and see things objectively. They try and take their own feelings out of the equation for the sake of efficiency. But remember that their goal is to get what they want. So although they're being objective from the point of view of this will work, this won't work, or this will get me what I want, this won't get me what I want. Now again, instincts and tri-type will affect that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some 3s will be more selfish than others. Some have a sense of social obligation, others don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The more you're talking, I'm calling a student of mine who was an ENP. I'm quite positive. And when I first looked through Enneagram, I thought was a 7 enthusiast. But as you're describing the achiever and that need for positive feedback and display, this is sounding closer. What would be a distinction between the 3 and the 7 in that way?
Well, remember, you could have 3 and 7 in the tri-type as well, so they could be both, or either or. But the 3, there'll be a polish and a sheen to it. They'll be much more micromanaging their image and so on, whereas the 7 cares a bit less. The 7 can care about that, but not as much. They're more about being the centre of attention and having fun, enjoying themselves. So
the achiever,
an example,
the promoter, the performer artisan would be the 7 more.
Another,
well,
not necessarily.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously.
A thing with the 3 is called the performer. In this, it's called that because
this is
in their mind, they're always performing. A type 3 artist, for example.
Oh, okay.
Or let's say a type 3 musician. A type 3 musician is not likely to be very creative. They're not so much the person that writes the songs so much. They can, but usually they're not. Usually they'll find out, or if they do write the songs, they're usually basing it off someone else's work. Instead, what they're doing is performing a song. So they're not worried about being emotionally authentic. They're worried about what will get the positive feedback of success. So very often the musicians or the sports or the athletes or the politicians, whoever, who are going from a script, 3s actually can really like having a good script and then doing the same thing over and over again and getting better and better at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is, let me make sure I'm over here at the 4.
Okay, the 4, the individualist. Look closely at the present you are constructing. It should look like the future you are dreaming. That was from Alice Walker. Now, the individualist is introspective, creative, and authentic. Their core desires are being authentic and unique, and their core fear is being without significance or identity.
Okay, so again, these are the 4 is part of the image center. So again, it's not so much being as the image of it. So the form will have the image of being authentic, and they'll talk a lot about being authentic, but you do have to keep in mind they're not entirely being honest with others or even themselves as regards to that, because they're basically deciding what is authentic about them and then trying to live up to that image. So I mentioned that 2s are positive types, 2s focus on the positive feelings, and they try and be emotional upbeat. 3s are competent, so they try to be emotional neutral and take feelings out of the equation. 4s are authentic types, 4, 6, and 8. Those are also called reactive types, and you can consider sometimes the negative types. They tend to focus on what they see as emotionally real, and they want whatever they see as emotionally real, they want it validated, and that often can be, for the 4 especially, or really all the types, the negative emotions, partly because they can see that everyone else is denying those emotions and they think they embrace them. Most other people either try and take things out of the equation, or they try and put a positive spin on things, unless they're 4, 6, or 8. Whereas the 4 thinks, why are you denying that? I want to be real. I want to swim in all my emotions. I want to be as deep as possible. So what the 4s will sometimes do is take their feelings and exaggerate them. A lot of 4s are prepared to tell half-truths and some white lies regarding how they're feeling or what a situation was like in order to keep a feeling alive. Like if they feel shame not necessarily shame. If they feel sad, for example, they may exaggerate their sadness and try and reinforce that sadness and want people to see them that their sadness is real in order to feel more authentic, rather than putting a positive spin on that sadness, rather than trying to find the silver lining and deny it, or rather than trying to take sadness out of the equation to solve the problem. So that's why they're associated very strong with the arts. It's not just sadness, it can be all kinds of feelings, but that's why they're very associated strong with the arts, because the arts are all about being emotions and exploring emotions and swimming in emotions. Yeah, so like I said, they're usually feeling introverts, possibly some feeling extroverts, but they're generally the INFJ, the INFP, and the ISFP, maybe NFP and stuff. Although when it comes to tri-type, it can be more complicated. A lot of INTJs and INTPs will have 4 in the tri-type. Like Ben is 4 in the tri-type, for instance. So 4s they're reactive. That's another thing. Reactive types, whether you call them reactive types or authentic types, whatever, they're called reactive because they go by their initial emotional reactions. So they're not really inclined to question or interrogate their feelings too much. Well, we'll see.
I was thinking too, especially like in a learning environment where, like with the 3, you mentioned that they can have a bit of a like repetitive task that they get better and better at or improving on. And I felt like maybe
the 4 does. Yeah, the 4 does
that. Right, versus the 4 is
4
more.
4 likes to be unique and authentic, and they quite like being different each time. It's not different for the sake of being different. It's for the sake of being unique, shall we say?
Yeah.
So with the 4, the other thing with the 4 is that they were withdrawn type. So if you have 4 in the tri-type, you will be more introverted. Withdrawn types, I describe them as moving into their center and away from the other centers. So 4s withdraw from the body and from the head into the heart. That means if you withdraw from the body, you physically withdraw, and if you withdraw from the head, you withdraw from your logic and your rational thought. And if you draw it into the heart, you are drawing into your emotions. So a stereotype would be someone who, if they feel uncomfortable in a room, they will leave and go to their own room and lock themselves in and play music or write poetry or do art, whatever. That's the stereotype of a four, just someone who wants time alone to explore their emotions through artistry. They're not necessarily going to be artists. They are going to be interested in the arts. They'll almost always be. At the same time, they do identify with being intellectual. They do identify with being very intelligent very often. And they can be very well read in whatever area of interest takes their fancy. But I said earlier that every type can be anti-intellectual. The four's anti-intellectual side is that subjective feeling trumps facts more often than not. They will like facts when it supports their subjective feeling, but they can disregard them when it doesn't. And with the three can disregard. The three can be anti-intellectual when they're more interested in the image of success than the truth of the facts, whatever.
Yeah,
the four.
I have a hard time probably with the four, picturing how to make sure a classroom is set up well for them or learning environment.
I will say fours are one of the rarest types, so you will get fours. You will get fours, but in most classrooms, but it'll be like one or two. One or two unusual children. I'm a legend in Ben's eyes. Well, thank you.
I wanted to say something. One of the reasons that I believe that the metacognitive strategies may be helpful is there's an emphasis on learning how you learn and learning how you think, as well as integrating prior knowledge so that hopefully they can somehow or the other develop a connection to what they're doing that's meaningful to them and that feels authentic. And unless you are thinking about how you're thinking and actually know yourself, and if that authenticity is as important to you as, or you say the appearance of authenticity, then let's say I believe you definitely need those kinds of strategies in order for them to be effective in the classroom or effective for you. Because
this sounds like the students I have that want to see like 5 to 20 ways to do a thing and to choose the one that they like best and stick with it. Or I guess have freedom even to change it, but to be shown a lot of different ways and not, I guess, at all be told this is the way or these are the best 3 ways.
I think fours would benefit a lot from the freedom to work by themselves and do their own, express themselves and do their own reading and do their own art and stuff. They need, at the same time, obviously, you need some generalized learning so that everyone's on somewhat the same page so that no one falls behind. But they do benefit from having at least a good deal of freedom to explore what interests them and to express themselves. And they want to be told that they're authentic, that they're real, that they're unique. With regards to the clothes they wear, for example, a lot of fours will be the ones that really hate it if they come in and they're dressed a certain way and someone's wearing what they're wearing, or even if they've got the watch. They're also very attached to vintage clothes, old-fashioned stuff. So yeah, and also
hipsters.
Well, yes and no. That could be different things.
Isn't that a uniform of its own?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a uniform necessarily. It matters is they're the ones. They're dressed how they are. They can also like belonging to small elite groups. They do, however, have a passion for protest, and they'll protest, and they do see themselves. They can have a feeling of being a victim. Like 4, 6, and 8 can all have a sense of victimhood in their own way, although Ace won't like the word victim. With 4s, it's the feeling of, as I said, they see themselves as unique. It's the feeling that no one understands them, no one can appreciate them. They don't necessarily like it if people say, I do understand you, well, I've been there. They might like that in doses, but they don't like it if people are trying to say that their experiences are not as unique as they feel they are.
Yeah.
Although the thing is, although I'm saying they like their experiences to be unique and they do see everyone as an individual, and the passion for protest can often go into championing individual rights and individual freedom of expression, at the same time, they can have a certain arrogance about feeling that they know themselves better than others. They explore emotions better than others. Therefore, they can understand other people better than people can know themselves, because they're going deep with themselves. So the type of empathy, they can be very empathic, but specifically their empathy is about emotional empathy and experiential empathy. Those are the main things, which is empathy about that starts with themselves. Here's how I feel. Here's how I would feel in your shoes. So here's how I think you feel, without necessarily making sure that the other person's doing that. So there can be a problem with that as well. But at the same time, they're very good at empathizing and exploring the troublesome sides of people, like sadness and shame and depression, and the darker sides that other people aren't necessarily willing to talk about or explore. So they're very good at, if someone needs to express themselves authentically, they're very good on that level, and they're championing that level. It's just a matter of making sure that they realize other people are being authentic in their own way. That's an important thing. The four needs to recognize that they're not the expert on authenticity that they might think they are. That other people are being authentic, or other people are being authentic in their own way. So, yeah, the four is a very emotional and complex type.
Okay. I'm enjoying, well, we'll go to the 5 and then I'll say that in a moment.
But I'll just say, though, the 4's not as complex as the 6.
You say? I didn't. Okay.
Although Ben identifies as a 6, just to humble brag.
Okay, Ben, is it complicated or more complex? What's the difference? Complicated
Probably
or
both.
complex?
That's an architect rational discussion for later on.
Oh my God, that'll take a few hours.
No, what it gets down to is that because the 6 is more ambivalent and more doubt.
I'll explain why
Jonathan
the 6
explains
is
better.
Yeah, I will wait.
I'm just tweaking him. I'm just tweaking him.
So are we skipping the 5?
No,
well, I don't know. If we're gonna launch.
Okay. Go back to the 5. Back to the 5.
5.
Okay. 5. Vision is the art of seeing the invisible. Now, type 5 is the investigator, independent, curious, and conceptual. Their core desire is being competent and capable, and they fear being incompetent or incapable.
All right. So where's the
This
next
sounds
bit?
to me like a very just curious student overall.
Teacher credibility. There you go.
Yeah, that's a big, yeah. Well, I was going to say, yeah, definitely when it comes to the research, these are the students that are definitely going to challenge the teacher. Even if they don't do it directly, psychologically, they're going to be doing a checklist of they got that partly right on, maybe not, and they'll do their own independent research after the fact. Definitely problem solving. The jigsaw method for these students, just to give you a little background, very much like project-based learning, it's where as a class, everyone is given they're given an overarching topic, and everyone is given a piece of that topic that they're to learn and master, and then we share. And it gives them additional responsibility of both the learning and then the teaching within the classroom.
That sounds good for this type and for the last 3 too, considering the image. Because it sounds like if you bring your piece of the puzzle to the table to contribute, that's going to factor into that positive image.
One of the reasons that this is good is that it's good and it's an effective method for cooperative learning for these students, because they're not necessarily having to interact as part of the learning process as much as the
they're getting to interact after they've done their learning. They're not necessarily, I won't say they're not cooperative students. It's just that the way that they like to process and the way that they like to learn definitely is independently. And sometimes it's very difficult for teachers to get them to work in groups.
I think my father was very good at building his curriculum. He had basically performance-based testing. And so I think that jigsaw method might be similar.
Yeah.
So we're in the realm of the head center now, we're away from the image. So the 5 cares less about the image than they care. Some 5s can be quite disheveled in their code, but others can good. Depends on where the heart type is and the tri type and so on, other things. But there's the 5 and the 9, generally speaking, care the least about how they dress, unless they learn to later on. 5s are usually. Sorry?
Well, I'm agreeing with you. I'm 5.
Yeah. So 5s are usually INTPs and INTJs. Usually, if someone is 5 in the tri type, that indicates intuition, or perhaps the ISTs. But generally,
an INFP from.
All right. INFP and INFJ as well, obviously. Yeah, but usually 5s are usually INTP. Core 5s are usually INTPs and INTJs, and 5 fix is usually any of the INFJ, INFP, maybe the ISTG and ISTP, and ENTJ and ENTP. The ENFP and the ENFJ are the least likely intuitives to have 5 in the tri type, but I have seen a couple who identify as that. Whether they are, I don't know. With the 5, you're thinking of a child who feels quite 5, 6, and 7, or really 4, 5, and 6. They have a sense of feeling small. 4 and 5 in particular feel small and overwhelmed by the world, and they're trying to hold on. And the way the 5s also try to hold on to their uniqueness and their privacy. But the 5 feels overwhelmed in a more anxious, intellectual way, or emotionally overwhelmed. So the 5s are withdrawn types, like the 4. So if the 4 withdraws from the gut, from the body and the mind into the heart, the 5 withdraws from the body and the heart into the head. So the 5 is going to be alone in the room by themselves, like the 4, but they're not going to be interested in their emotions as much. They're going to be in their head. They're going to analyze, and they'll need the alone time, the privacy, to work things out and work out problems. If they're 5 and 4, it can be a bit more complex, but generally they're more interested in the intellectual side of things. So even if a 5 is interested in the arts and humanities and wants to be an expert in that, they'll still be looking at it in a more analytical sense, like a philosopher or a researcher, or perhaps like an expert in art history who really wants to know the structure of a church or whatever, rather than the feeling. They're a bit more interested in intellectual accuracy, so on. They're also, as I said, the competent types. So again, they take the emotions out of the equation, or they try to. They tend to take. A lot of 5s can take their lack of emotion. A lot of 5s can take their intellectual objectivity for granted. They're a bit more passively rational than some other types. Whereas, so they don't really need to learn to question authority or to ask if someone's trustworthy or not. They do that naturally. They trust their own judgment, their own mind above anything else. They're very reliant on their mind. And what happens is they'll often have a shyness to them, and they won't really know how to fit in at school, or they might not understand social situations very well, and they feel like other people have the rule book and they never got it. Sabrina's smiling. With the 5, what they want to do is when they feel overwhelmed and withdrawn to their mind and withdrawn to their private research, what they want to do is find a field of interest, an area of interest that they really are into, and learn as much about it as possible and master it. And then they feel like they're safe. Knowledge brings this feeling of safety and security and confidence. Once they have the knowledge, they have the confidence to interact with others. And very often they'll look for people who share their similar interests of whatever it is. So they can have trouble interacting with other students that don't share these interests, but they get on quite well when people are interested in what they want to say. So I find that 5s socially, they'll generally like 2 social roles, I think. One is to be the expert in a group of friends, or the other is to be an expert in a group of other experts. Yeah.
That's true. That is so true. I think back to high school, I had friends that told me that I had moods, and I don't consider myself to be a moody person. And they said we could just tell when you were sick of being around people.
Yeah. So 5s,
Yeah.
even if they're,
They wouldn't see me. They wouldn't have any idea that I'm sicker than.
yeah.
Yeah.
That could be a difference between a 5 with 1 in the tri-type and a 5 with 9 in the tri-type. 5 with 9 can be a bit more put up with stuff for the sake of peace. But with 5s, they really value their alone time because that's how they make sense of things. If they feel like they have limited amounts of energy, especially for socializing. So it's associated with avarice, which is sometimes called greed, but it's really more like hoarding time and hoarding space, especially. They're almost always very intelligent. They can be very intelligent, but it's independent research mostly. So if they think the teacher doesn't know what they're talking about, they're not going to like that, but generally they're more interested in doing their own work. And very often when they're not at school, they will be doing their own reading and research, whatever it is that interests them anyway. One of the more, if you're an extrovert with 5 in your tri-type, that will make you more introverted. And if you're an introvert who's 5, even more so, introverted introvert or introverted extrovert. Again, tri-type varies. So for a type 5 student, they'll like lots of time and space themselves. They like to have smaller groups of friends rather than large groups. They might feel a bit shy. A lot of 5s feel a bit shy about being forced to socialize or being forced to stand up and speak. They do benefit from it. So this is where the balance comes in. You have to, if you're teaching a 5, you have to strike the balance between knowing that this makes them a bit anxious and uncomfortable, but also that they could benefit, that it can be good for them as long as you manage it properly. So don't try and force them, but do try and encourage them. That's what I would say.
And probably too that presentation sharing, anything like that, isn't something that they feel they fully comprehend.
Well, if they feel confident in what they're talking about, they can absolutely do that. They do like to share information. They do like to share what they learned, especially if they're a social 5. Sorry?
Okay. Even to a large group?
Yeah, even to a large group. Like a lot of professors, for example, could be 5s, or not necessarily 5s, but yeah, 5s when they grow up very often want to be, they can be very attracted to the role of professional intellectual.
I would definitely say it's a little bit different to get up and speak because to a large extent that's still kind of one way versus getting out in a group and going to a conference for that then where the networking and meeting and shaking hands and changing cards. That's a whole lot different than standing up on a stage and speaking out to the group.
At the same time, though, 5s, although they feel like they didn't get the rule book regarding socialization, they do write their own rule book, and some 5s can become really good social experts. They become really good at reading people intellectually.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't have gotten into people if I hadn't had my father, a psychologist.
Yeah. So
I would have been in one of those dumb engineers.
yeah. So yeah, a lot of emotionally withdrawn type that needs a lot of intellectual stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some files are more emotional than others, but generally that's consistent. Needs someone who's a student who needs a lot of alone time and time to research and stuff, but should be encouraged to join in, and works best when people have shared interests and are interested in what they have to say. If they want to bring a 5 out of their shell, it's about showing an interest in their areas of interest and what they know about, and also making them realize that they like that and other people like it when they take an interest in them.
Yep.
Right on point.
Yep.
All right, to the 6.
The 6, it's not so much how busy you are, but what you are busy. The bee is praised, the mosquito is swatted. The type 6 is the loyalist. They're dedicated, skeptical, security seeking. Their core desire is to be secure and safe, and their core fear is being without support or guidance.
All right.
So I'm not a 6.
Yeah.
It's funny on some of these how, like, you just know right away, like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Well,
but
actually,
but I'm not any of the other stuff.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah,
I think
that's for sure. Yeah.
Actually, 6 is the type most likely to mistype, so just be aware of that. 6 is.
Jonathan, could you, for the audience and for Dave, could you slightly talk about how they vary by temperament?
I will in a moment.
So
first of all, 5, 6, and 7, as I said, are part of the head center. 6 is the primary type of the head center. It is about analyzing things and thinking and overthinking in the case of the 6, but it's also about anxiety and fear. So they all have different ways of experiencing anxiety and deal with anxiety. The 5, which we just talked about, is anxious about the outer world and their ability to deal with it, and that's why they withdraw into themselves. The 7 is anxious about their inner world, their negative emotions and stuff, and they deal with that by extroverting and trying to distract themselves. The 6 is anxious about both. So the 6 can be anxious internally and externally. Some will be more, you'll get a 6 with a 5 wing, winning 5. They'll be more about the outer world. 6 with a 7 wing, winning 7, more the inner world. But all 6s can have this tendency to general anxiety. And they're kind of, I want to talk about the core types for a second. So the 6 is the core type in the head center, the 3 is the core type in the heart center, and the 9 is the core type in the gut center. So they're kind of paradoxical, 3, 6, and 9, because they kind of overdo and underdo their center. So with 3, they overdo the image. Remember, the heart type is also the image type. They overdo the image because they micromanage their own stuff, but they underdo the heart because they're the most emotionally detached of the heart center.
Okay.
The 6, meanwhile, the 6 kind of overthinks, but to the point of not being able to think for themselves. So that's the paradox with 6. So they're always asking questions, they're always tracking consistency. In others, they're looking not so much for truth, looking for trustworthy or not trustworthy. If a 6 is very unhealthy, they can have a really hard time determining between something that's obviously true and obviously false. They cannot make up their mind. They doubt, and then they doubt their doubt. So this can be the paranoid person if they're very unhealthy. So I think to understand about paranoids, even if they believe all kinds of wacky things, in a sense they don't really believe in anything because they've got that doubt. That's why anything could be true in the mind of the 6. It could be. They'll insist some things are true and some things are false, or some things are the way they are and some things aren't. But internally, there's actually doubt. They can actually have a tendency to lie as well, but their lies are most about not getting in trouble. They're afraid of being blamed. They're afraid of being held responsible for things they did or did not do, because they have this belief that if they're blamed, they're going to be punished unjustly or destroyed. They can have a fear of annihilation, of being utterly destroyed and done away with, especially if they're self-praised 6, we'll get to. Regarding the complexity of the 6 and the variation by temperament, the 6 is reactive, so they're emotionally reactive, they react to things. They are compliant, which means they're role abounding, they're aware of roles. Oh, pardon me. And they're also adaptive. So 3, 6, and 9 are also adaptive types. That means they try and adapt to the situation, and they're looking in particular for people or ideas or systems or whatever they can adapt to for security. This means that the 6 is the most sensitive to their environment, and that's where the complexity comes in and the variety comes in. They're the most, in a way, they're the most shaped by their environment. So you can get 2 6s. They're both 6s, but they're very different. They've also been divided into the phobic 6 and the counterphobic 6. The phobic 6 has the fear and tries to deal with fear by avoiding it. The counterphobic 6 has the fear and deals it by attacking it and confronting it. So a counterphobic 6 might be afraid of skydiving, for example, and therefore will go skydiving to try and overcome that fear. And it will work for about 5 minutes, and they'll have to do it again. But they have to keep overcoming their fear. A very counterphobic 6 can seem like a very aggressive and assertive person. They usually be in the tri-type, but internally they're actually kind of afraid. And the counterphobic 6 can be very anti-authority. The strong counterphobic 6 can be very anti-authority and question authority and challenge things, but they're kind of authoritative in their own way, and they're still looking for an authority. So someone who challenges authority all the time out of fear, they're actually kind of looking for authority. They feel like they need it, but they can't trust it. That's their dichotomy. And they might adhere to groups that challenge authority, but they're submitting to the authority of the group or the authority of the ideology, whatever. The phobic 6 will be...
glad that you put words to that, Jonathan.
Yeah. The phobic 6 is more outwardly subservient to authority, but in private they can complain about it more, and their subservience to authority is about not getting in trouble. All phobic 6s can be a bit counterphobic, and all counterphobic 6s can be a bit phobic, especially in their private times, and most 6s are somewhere in between. So you do get 6s that are phobic in some areas of their life and counterphobic in others. And the relationship to authority is about who to trust and who to give power to and who to follow. Obviously, in practice, they'll have some authorities that they trust and follow and some they don't like at all. You'll see that in politics all the time. Your guy is the guy you go to support, and the other guy is the guy you go to challenge, even though both are authority figures. But what they're really looking for is someone to give them an anchor to their overthinking. It's like they want order and consistency and trust on the outside because they feel anxious and chaotic and unsure within. So there's a degree of overcompensation. So
it definitely would be the ones that would like the traditional classroom, as we sort of stereotypically see it.
The phobic 6s will like the traditional classroom. The counterphobic 6s will challenge the traditional classroom, or might be more likely to. Again, so the phobic 6s tend to be more like a guardian in cage attainment. The counterphobic 6s tend to be more like an artisan, regardless of their type. Generally, if a guardian is a 6, they will be a phobic 6, and generally, if an artisan is a 6, you may get some artisans that are a bit more like a guardian, but generally more counterphobic. And with the NFs and the NTs, it could be a bit either or.
So to cover all of the 6s then, would the kind of structured and predictable kind of like learning expectations also need to be backed with reasons or research.
Yes, they like
or
to know.
proven methods.
Yes, they really benefit from being told why this rule exists and why it makes sense. Although you have to make sure that it does make sense in their eyes. If it doesn't make sense in their eyes, then explaining it might not do any good. You may have exposed this fraud. But
Right.
you all get sixes who will accept the teacher unquestionably, no matter, even if a really silly teacher who's saying nonsense, they might follow them unquestioningly because they trust them and they don't want to get in trouble. Whereas a counterphobic 6 might challenge a teacher who's completely trustworthy and telling the truth because they're geared to that. So what you really need is, what they really like, all 6s like consistency, regardless of it. And all 6s, in a way, they're looking for people to put up with them, like put up with their anxiety and their moods and their questions, and to be their rock, almost. They like it when others are kind of like a rock. Although they can struggle with being a rock themselves. All 6s give up power to authority figures or to allies, whatever. They project power onto others. That's not for the benefit of the authority, that's for their own benefit. So they see power as kind of a burden, because with great power comes great responsibility, and with great responsibility comes the capacity for being blamed and being held responsible. So even if the 6 is doing really well, they'll still worry that if they get a thing wrong, they'll be blamed for it. But when they're giving up power to authority, do bear in mind, if you are that authority figure, do bear in mind that in their eyes, they can snatch that power back anytime. They can challenge you when they want. They're going on with what you're saying because they trust you with this, or because they trust you more than they trust anyone else. They might not actually trust you that much. They may think you're just better than the alternative. And if they become authority figures, it can be a bit tricky. So if they're in charge of, if you think of students that might be in charge of a group, for example, or they might get a type 6 teacher or authority figure, there'll be the fear of getting in trouble with whoever they see as their authorities. That can be the teacher, that can be the superintendent, that can be the roles, government, whatever. There'll be all these balances. They can be fiercely loyal, and then until they're not, because the loyalty is about security.
Would this be a reason to make sure that the student has like multiple teachers or mentors or someone in their life, so that they almost decide to turn on one, that they have other connections?
They almost always will. They almost always will have other people in their lives. They'll have an inner committee, basically, an inner committee of authority figures. Authority, by the way, isn't necessarily a person. It could be friends, could be family, could be an ideology, could be a religion, could be a job, could be a sports team, could be a fandom, whatever, all kinds of things. Anything concrete or abstract, whatever it is. They'll usually have a few, and they're going with the I'm Ben's boss. They're going with the tried and true according to whatever it is they're adhering to. So that's where it gets tricky with counterphobic 6s, because counterphobic 6s will like to see themselves as rebellious and free-thinking, independent, even while they're conforming to this counterculture group. They'll see themselves as the kids that see themselves as counterculture, well, very obviously conforming to a counterculture group. Like we all know kids like that. We all know people like that. They like to have. Sorry.
This is more of an aspect than a type.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's the counterphobic 6. So again, this is, like I said, this is where tri-type would come in very handy.
Yeah.
Like a 6 with 9 will be more phobic, a 6 with 8 will be more counterphobic, a 6 with 1 will be kind of in the middle, and so on. They'll also like to conform to their peer group. They'll usually have a group of between 2, 3, 4, or 5 people who they consider their close friends, who they rely on, who they can vent to and complain about with. who share their fears. They like people who share their fears. They kind of, all types can think that everyone is like them. All types can project their own personality onto everyone else and assume that everyone else has something wrong with them. The 6, though, really is looking for, more than any other type, they're looking for the like-minded, the people who share their fears and concerns and their values and stuff. And they'll conform to a group and adopt those fears if they have to. But they're really looking for ones who are most similar to them, or whatever they believe in. So again, I feel like I'm rambling about that's because of the complexity of the type that Ben mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the correlations between Enneagram type and Myers-Briggs type, the 6 seems to be the one that almost any Myers-Briggs type can be. Yeah. So that's where you get all the sheer variety. Like fear is universal.
So Jonathan, are you going to tell us like what the NF6 is like? And like because we did 3 events on this last year. A sort of a summary.
Well, I think we should go to the. Let's go to.
I will say
more the teaching aspect of that.
Yeah. I will say that INFP. Yeah, I will say that there's a lot of INFP 6s and there's a lot of ENFP 6s and INFJ and E. There are a lot of 6s that are NFs, but there's 6s across all the types.
Yeah. To me, it's more. I would have, when I was a kid, I tested out as a Myers-Briggs INTJ, and I was worried that I might be typed as a ISTJ, and then I realized, well, what I was afraid of was that I would be something like a 6, and the answer was, well, no, I'm not a 6. I am detailed. I love rational analysis, but the rest of the stuff is, I would like love questions, like questions.
So,
whatever.
The weird thing is, just talking about the 6, is that the way the traits in the Beatrice Chestnut book, the 27 paths, it's like you've got the contrarian thinker as the key trait of the 6, and the relation to authority. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more counterphobic-ish in that book than
even
other descriptions of the 6.
Well, even a phobic 6 will question authority, but they're questioning authority so they can follow it more easily. They won't question it to the degree that a counterphobic 6 will, and they're more comfortable with conformity. Yeah. They don't like the image of a aggressive counterculture person so much, unless they're going along with a counterculture person.
Right.
Again, very sensitive to the environment is the 6. So the phobic 6s will especially like the structured framework. The counterphobic 6 also does, but they'll challenge it a lot more. Yeah. And they'll want a bit more freedom.
So I had a distinction maybe to make too that I think has come up with the 5 and the 6 now, and the kinds of questions asked in the way, and might come up when we get to the 8 too. But there's a difference between the students that would ask me a question because I misspeak or something's mistyped on a presentation versus the ones which I was more on the 5 as the asking to clarify or correct.
Yeah. Fives.
Jonathan, what you could do in this example is maybe see the difference between, say, an INTP 5 and an INTP 6 for this example with Christen.
That'll be tricky.
Yeah, I was thinking just between the 5 and 6, because we noted on 5 that they can call their teachers out.
So 2s, so 5s, 8s, and 2s, they all see themselves as they all like to see themselves as self-reliant, independent, and not needing others so much. So 5s don't actually like to ask questions if they can help it. If a 5 doesn't know an answer to something, they will try and think about it first, or they'll try and research it, and if it doesn't happen, then they'll ask the question for the clarification. Right. So 5s only ask questions if they have to almost, or if or maybe if it's expected, or perhaps to show off. But generally, the 5s are not the type that ask too many questions. They're the types that want to provide the answers.
They ask their questions. They ask their questions to themselves.
Yes, very much. The 5s very trust their own judgment. The 6 may or may not. The 6 does not trust their own judgment. They might they might think they trust it. They might say they're free thinkers, but really they're questioning authority all the time. They're questioning someone's trustworthiness. The phobic 6 is more nervous about that. The carnivore 6 is obviously much more overt in their questioning, but they're all there. It's not even overt questioning. It's not always like, how do you know this? Whatever. It's sometimes like asking questions indirectly, or bringing up topics and seeing how people react to it. Like maybe an adult 6 will be reading a newspaper and they'll see a story and they'll bring it up and ask, what do you think about that? Or they'll just bring it up just to see how people react to things. Ace can do this as well, but what the 6 is looking for is someone to anchor their overthinking. Someone can be the rock. Also someone who they can vent to and can point to. That's more for their closer intimates. But they do like to get things off their chest. They don't actually like to have esoteric knowledge. That's another difference. The 5s can like to have specialized esoteric knowledge that they know and other people don't. The 6 can be more anxious and ambivalent about that because that can make them feel a bit more responsible. The 6 would like to share knowledge just for the sake of making sure that they won't be singled out as the one who knew and said nothing. So they'll like to have at least a handful of people that they can share a secret with, for example. Yeah. So as far as in the classroom goes, as you can see, this is a very complicated type. And it's more than any other. It's hard to say one size fits all, but they do benefit from, even if they're counterphobic, they benefit from structure and consistency. Consistency especially. They need to know that the teacher is trustworthy in who they say they are. Even if they don't like the teacher, as long as the teacher is consistent, as long as the teacher is consistent and trustworthy, that's what they're looking for.
Amen. You know, it's funny you say that. I can remember as a student, and 6 is my wing, that I did not have to like the teacher. And if a teacher was consistently mean to everybody, I just said they were a mean teacher, and I didn't worry about it. It would only be if it was targeted that would ever, to a student, that it would ever bother me, because at least you knew where you stood.
Yeah.
As long as they're consistent.
They can have a weird relationship with favoritism. They can be the 6 can definitely do that, but they don't like it in others. The 6 is almost like a sort of negative entitlement in a way, like because they see themselves as kind of small, like they're projecting their power, so they feel powerless, therefore less responsible, less blameworthy. They can hold people to higher standards themselves, while simultaneously not liking when other people do that. So they're seeing themselves as either enforcing the rules set down by authority or challenging the rules set down by the authority. But they do want those rules to be consistent and make sense no matter what. They want to know what the rules. They also want to know what the rules are before they decide to challenge them or to follow them. So really, as far as being a teacher goes, the 6 would like a teacher who is consistent, is rock solid, and to allows them to vent, but also knows when to put them in their place if they have to. And has a reason for everything they do and is willing to explain the reasoning.
Okay. So 7?
7.
So 7, expect the unexpected, and whenever possible, be the unexpected. The 7 is the enthusiast. They're open, expressive, adaptable. Their core desire is being satisfied and content, and their core fear being deprived or trapped.
Okay, any comments first from anyone?
So what are the Myers types? This looks like the
Champion idealist.
Yeah, usually
champion idealist and the
extrovert,
the artisans.
EXX,
right?
yeah, the EXXPs. So the ESFP, NTP, ESTP, ENFP. Usually those are the those are the core sevens.
The EPs.
If someone's,
in Meyer's terms, the EPs kind of.
Yeah, if someone is 7 in their tri-type, it tends to make them more extroverted. It's quite common for ENFJs. ENFJs usually have ENFJs and ENTJs. Sorry, ENFJs usually have 7 or 6 in the tri-type. So it's very common. It's very common for extroverts of 7. Sometimes introverts. It's a bit more rare, but if they're an introvert, it can make them a bit more extroverted. So the 7 is assertive, like the 3 and the 8. So again, there's that innocent selfishness. Someone's farting. So that innocent selfishness of identifying what they want and going for it, and not really feeling too bad about it, not feeling guilty over that, assuming that everyone else should just do what they want as well and be free to do it. Positive as well, meaning positive means upbeat, silver lining, avoiding the negative. The 7 has the anxiety. Like I said, the 5 and the 6 have anxiety. The 7's anxiety is about the inner world and their negative emotions. So they're trying to avoid feelings of anxiety, feelings of shame, and so on, by putting the silver lining and stuff, by being positive, to the point where it can sometimes be an issue. So if you're dealing with a 7 who's always avoiding when things are getting too serious or dark, whatever, a good way to handle them is tell them that we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to discuss something for those 5 minutes, something serious, because at least then they know there's a way out. There's going to be an end point to it. And then perhaps we build up to 10 minutes and 15 minutes and get them to endure it. If they're dealing with something negative, they like to have the exit and they like to feel safe when they're doing it. As far as their learning types go, because 5, 6, and 7 are the head types, they all have their own analytical styles. So the 5 is the depth of knowledge and wants to be the expert in things. The 6 is kind of ambivalent and questions authority and wants to know who to trust. The 7, though, is more like the breadth of knowledge and learning for fun, learning for excitement, learning for what interests them. So the 7's likes novelty, the 7 likes difference, variety. They like spontaneity and openness, as it says. All types can benefit from structure, but they're probably the types that will ignore structure the most if they can. And they're also 5, 6, and 7 all have attitudes to authority. 6 isn't the one that challenges authority, but the 5 kind of withdraws from authority and tries to question it from an objective standpoint. The 7 likes to just ignore authority. 7 likes to pretend authority is not there, and perhaps make fun of it, but again, not taking it seriously. 7s have a certain anarchist tendency to them, but they tend to be very positive, upbeat, likable, tend to naturally gravitate to leadership positions despite their tendency for anarchy. So they want everyone to be equal and they'll be in charge, or they'll take the lead. Or rather, they want everyone to be equal and they'll be the center of attention, while being the center of attention. That's the sort of thing. But they tend to assume that everyone wants to have fun. Everyone wants to enjoy themselves. Everyone wants to be positive. Everyone wants to do what they want. That's the goal for them. So they can definitely.
Sorry to interrupt. Could Sabrina explain the transfer strategies? What does that mean?
Sabrina, you're muted. You're muted, Sabrina. You're still muted.
Yeah. I'm here. Yeah, I have just had some crazy connectivity issues, so I switched back just to make sure that I was there. So let me pull up. Okay, for the transfer strategy, I'll give you those. Some samples. Basically, it encompasses using a variety of media, taking time to reflect, explain, identify gaps in your knowledge, establish goals. If anything, it is the biggest hodgepodge of strategies and being willing to try any and everything that works at the drop of a hat versus the concrete sequential, let's do it this way methodology. Because that's who you're dealing with. You're dealing with folks that need that immediate adaptability, that have a short attention span. And as a teacher, you have got to be able to pull those things right out of your hat. Early childhood teachers do this with ease. That's why they gravitate toward that grade level. It's not something that is intrinsic to a lot of your upper grade teachers. So it's definitely helpful to remind them when you're dealing with the 7, you might have to do a few more things than you normally would do in a regular classroom.
Right.
So when you were
also concepts mapping a little bit close to that.
Can I stick on the transfer strategies for one second?
Sure.
And then, when you say the transfer strategies, it sounds a bit to me like throwing spaghetti at a wall. And one of the first tutoring students that I had was in middle school with this. And it definitely works. Like Jonathan pointed out, they like to challenge teachers, but like in a make fun way. And I remember something he was making fun of, and I said, "Oh, you don't like that? What would you rather do instead?" And that totally threw him off, and he actually came up with an idea of what he wanted to do, but it was that constant versatility in the way that we were learning, that it really did work. It sounds chaotic, but it worked great, and he was able to tie, like the learning by association under learning styles, was able to tie everything together over time.
Right. In other words, basically just get a little feedback from that individual, and they're part of their learning, as opposed to just in the classroom, right? It's the teacher's agenda, or their teacher's agenda, whereas the enthusiasts, whether they're idealists or artisans or even rationals, they would be, they want to kind of go their direction, or learn their own way. Transfer. So concept mapping.
Okay, concept mapping. If you think about you and Ben and everything that you guys put together is form of a concept map or a graphic organizer, that is essentially applying that technique to that group. And understanding how do these things fit together, because for these kids, a lot of times they've got bits of information that they've taken in. Okay, now how do we pull this together so that we understand the much larger picture in a slightly more organized manner? And so that's where concept mapping can help. Like I said, you guys, I thought I did it well until I met you two, and it's like, no, I definitely at that beginner's level. But for a classroom teacher, a lot of time, like I said, what's really funny about some of these strategies, a lot of classroom teachers don't teach that way, especially if they are they tend to lean toward more traditional style of instruction.
Sabrina, you've got a champion idealist.
Yes.
Daughter, I believe. So, and you've got experience of ESF, performer artisans. So for them, they might need to work out how, like the connections for them more than say ENTP, because ENTP is naturally going to do it, but they can have problems with some kind of a particularly structured thinker. Say a structured theory, those two types can have an issue with those. And I would say it's particularly ESFP, and they need to know, it needs to be brought into reality. So for instance, Jeff, he took a lot of convincing before he believed in Kersey's theory. And it was like, it'd have to be like, because it was like, his mother gave him the book, and he was about 20, and he was like, who's this old guy? How does this guy know about me? How does this David Kersey guy know about me? And he knows nothing about my life. And it's like, but it was like just the fact that he saw it so much in his life, it was almost like, sort of like hit over the head with it, that he accepted it. And so, because as Dave mentioned, artisans are cynical, and probably ESFP is probably the most resistant type to anything that's overly theoretical, if it's not got that immediate relevance to their life.
And Jeff would play with when he was on the forum, he would play with this, and I had to kick him off a couple times. the original one, because and it wasn't malevolent. It just said, Jeff, that's kind of rather gross. So just so but he is one of the best advocates for Kersey temperament, because he sees through the bullshit of all the Myers and sorry, the Enneagram people.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say, one thing too, in a classroom where a teacher is using concept mapping, it can be a great way of working on something that they can start off literally with a blank canvas and then start to build this together, so that everything that they've learned, they can certainly see how they could tie it together. I want to say Robert Marzano does a variety of techniques in his understanding by design and concept mapping. Graphic organizers, like I said, are a large part of his toolkit that he provides for teachers.
So question. So the being able to interact, the teacher be interactive, knowing what structure, like the concept. So let's take the example of our temperament. So I'm gonna steer all the people towards those 4 concepts. But if I'm interacting with everybody, in fact, that's what I'm kind of doing with my stuff is I got my framework, and I'm soliciting people's words, but I'm kind of directing it and picking and choosing in some sense. But I think it's been useful for people to be involved with the process, the learning process, and that they benefit from that because you have that, I have the concept map, and everybody else can see the patterns.
Absolutely. When you look at the chart, for example, on vulnerability, is a perfect example that if you had that in the classroom, the students can start to pull the pieces together for that. Oh, look at Jonathan. He's so funny.
It's because I changed his name. I used the power went to my head and I changed his name.
His expression.
Yeah,
so it looked like he himself.
So what's the deal?
Well, I had a new power as a host as I changed people's names. So I added Scottish Yoda to Jonathan, and I slightly tweaked everybody's name in the event. So I added INTP and David's probable tri-type to his name.
Anyway, back on topic. So has anyone seen that cartoon Recess, Disney's Recess?
No.
If you do, it's a good. Okay, if you do, it's a good for this topic, because it's all about kids in school, and they're all great representations of Enneagram types. So type 7, the main character in the show is a type 7 ENTP, I think. And he's a kid. But 7s, like 17. Let me start again. Type 7 students in school like being the leaders, like coming up with the ideas and like the novelty. They're very future oriented. All 7s are future oriented, and they like looking forward to things, like having things to look forward to for tomorrow and the following week and the next one, whatever. And they can sometimes like looking forward to things more than the actual experience. Sometimes some 7s will just spitball all kinds of fun ideas to do in the future, and then end up not doing them just because they were more into the imagining what it'd be like. But they do enjoy experiences and new experiences. So a lot of type 7s will need freedom. They'll need variety. They'll need stuff to do. They will be generally more drawn to subjects that are less serious in nature, or they'll be drawn to serious subjects but the less serious side of those subjects. They tend to be, sometimes can be very, very intelligent, and they can do very well in school if they enjoy learning. But they grow best by learning which things interest them most and learning to specialize. So they can become experts, but their natural default is to breadth of knowledge and learning for fun. So as long as they find learning fun, that's when they work best. So yeah.
That makes sense. I recall a student whose papers started being increasingly disorganized. And no matter how many times we reviewed paper organization, it didn't work. So I had him do a presentation to teach basic basketball skills. And he came in and did that, and he organized it very well. And then I said, okay, now that is what we need to start doing with your papers, same as far as how you ordered it. But that's what got him re-engaged, and it was changing. It couldn't stick with the dry instruction.
Yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that sevens do get anxious with boredom. Boredom does make them anxious because boredom can invite the negativity. They're using variety to avoid their feelings of anxiety and negativity. So they're over distractions in a way. I was going to say something, but
well, actually, so my father had the term "ennui." It's a term that means the artisans are afraid of it's called their depression is ennui, which means basically they get afraid of boredom.
Oh yeah, ennui.
Ennui. So yeah, the thing is, everybody has ennui. It's just like, you're bored. Let's get the hell out of here, or do something, or whatever, and that being able to perform your learning, for the artisans and all of us, be able to perform your learning, being a teacher, right? I mean, one thing that was good for me is I had to become a teacher, and it's like, holy crap, what do I do? Yeah, I failed as a teacher, but I learned a lot by failing as a teacher.
So, yeah, that's ennui. So sevens, I'd say as far as a teacher goes, a seven would benefit from a teacher who is fun and engaging, but at the same time knows their stuff and can engage their interests, engage this interest of all the students, and isn't too harsh, but knows how to discipline them without being overly harsh, whatever. And again, making sure that they know why they're being disciplined, if it's fair, like if they're being too disruptive, if it's explained to them. But good example is Jamie Escalante. If anybody's interested in that, Okay. I have no idea who that is.
He was the one that took a bunch of kids in a very poor performing school in Southern California. I can't remember the exact thing. He got all of them to people that were doing not too bad at all. They got math. They became math extremely successful in the math AP classes, and they basically got high scores and got into college. And he was very good at the math thing. Jamie Escalante. I can't remember the title.
Did they make a movie about him?
Yeah, that's a movie. I'm trying to remember the movie.
Was it Stand and Deliver?
It was Edward James Olmos,
yeah.
I think, played him.
Almost that.
Yeah.
What's that? Can anybody remember the movie's name?
Was it Stand and Deliver?
Stand and Deliver. Stand
and
and
Deliver.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember now.
Right. So yeah. That's actually true of sevens. Sevens are idealists and can be prompt cultural revolutions, like not in the Maoist sense, not in the Chinese sense, but like the changing the culture and doing something new for the sake of doing something new and trying it out, experimenting for fun. So Type 7 teachers can be a lot of fun. Type 7's teachers can challenge the way things are done because they think something's more interesting or novel or better. Type 7 students would appreciate that. Type 7s can like other 7s as long as they're not competing for attention too much. But yeah, basically, a student that wants to be, they can be very intelligent if they're, and can do very well if they're engaged with the subject, and if their things are kept positive and upbeat, and they know how to be. It could have been Feynman could have 7, and knows how to. I don't know what I was saying.
Yeah.
Basically,
another example of a enthusiast teacher would be Dead Poet Society.
Oh yes, Robert Williams was definitely a 7, and he played 7s a lot. Yeah, that's a great example of a type 7 teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the student who kills himself in the end, he's probably a type 4 student with a type 6, a self-pressed 6-3-1 father. Just a very type 6, 3-ish, a 3-ish, 6-ish culture at that school, all about achievement and tradition and keeping things going the way things have done. And then the 7 comes in and makes things more fun and interesting. But yeah, that's a great example of a type 7 teacher.
Yeah.
So.
There was a good scene when he did John Wayne playing Macbeth. Is that a dagger I see before me?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that film in ages. But yeah. So yeah.
The 8.
Here we have the challenger. The brave do not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all. Type 8 is the challenger. They're daring, provocative, and they're little kids that they challenge the status quo. Their core desire is being self-governed and independent, and their core fear is being controlled or harmed.
I would say that it's challenged themselves as much, and it's also called the leaders. The 8 is not challenging the status quo in the way a 6 or a 7 is. The 8, more than any other type, likes their own independence. They like to feel in control of their lives. So when they're challenging something, it's in that context of who the hell are you to tell me what to do? Or they do like testing people the way a 6 might, or a 7. Well, the way 6 does, and figuring out if they can trust someone, but not in the way they see them as. The thing with the 6 is looking for that authority figure to trust. The 8, is not seeing other people as an authority so much. They're just seeing, are you a good guy or a bad guy? Are you honorable or not? Whatever. They tend to assume that they're equal, or certainly their own. People might be less than them, but they're not less than anyone else. That's what they like to think. They very much feels in control of themselves.
It's 8 students I've known.
It's tend to be extroverts, usually thinking extroverts. Usually the ESTP, the ENTJ, the ESTJ, sometimes the ENTP and the sometimes the ENTP and the ENFP and maybe the ESFP. And a few types can have 8 in the tri-type. A lot of INTJs will have 8 in the tri-type if they don't. Obviously, Sabrina's got a 1 in tri-type, but you will find that more blunt, direct, mastermind, stereotypical mastermind INTJ will usually have 8 in the tri-type. It's don't like to censor themselves so much. They'll be polite when they want to be polite, and they will say what they want when they want to say what they want. They are like 4, 6, and 8, as I said, are the authentic types, but the 8 is probably the most authentic type in a way. Even if they're telling bald-faced lies, they're still sort of the way Trump does, the way Trump can tell bald-faced lies, but people who support him still say they like his honesty and they like how wanted forthright he is.
Yeah, because he's direct.
He's direct.
But it's just direct.
He's not honest. He's not direct. He's not honest. He's direct.
Well, another way to think of it is that he's honest, but he's not truthful. He's honest. He's telling you what he really thinks. He's telling you what he really thinks and what he really feels.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not is irrelevant.
Yeah. He feels and in the microsecond that he's thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he could fool a lie detector then.
Yeah, he probably would fail a lie detector because he believes.
No, I tend to call it an insincerity detector rather than a lie detector.
You mean pass? You mean he'd pass it, not fail it?
You would pass one.
Yeah. So Trump's an example of an 873 or 837. So triple assertive. Like I said, 3-7 and 8 are assertive types. So that innocent selfishness of identify what you want and go for it. 8s feel like they can do what they like. They can indulge themselves. They tend to.
Combo? What was that combo? 8-7 what?
3. 837, 873.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he wants the success. He wants to have fun, and he wants to have power, and particularly power over his own life. Always, if you ask an 8 if they want to have power over others, they'll say no. What they want to have is power over their own lives, and the fact that other people happen to be objects within those lives is something doesn't always consciously register. They have to be reminded that people are people, and they're not just good guys or bad guys. Because Ace can fall into cartoon thinking and start seeing himself as the heroes, or at least the anti-heroes, versus all the other guys.
Sorry, one more question. I forget these things. I'm still surely getting the terminology. So the tri-type is not it's not 873. That's not the other 3 combination 3. What's the body? Then the 3 of
the 8 would be his gut. His preference in the gut center would be 8. His preference
it is. Oh, it is.
Yeah. He's definitely an 8, but specifically he's 873.
Yeah. Sorry, I've forgotten the 3. The tree.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
So if you had an 863 or an 853, those would be kind of different. Like Luthor, Superman's enemy, he's an 853, 835, a bit more introverted and cerebral.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So.
Can we take the Trump off the screen though? Because I want to say these students in the classroom are, I find rather manageable.
Yeah, it's our very direct. It's our Trump's obviously a particular subtype, a particular type of 8. That's the thing, and he had a particular type of childhood as well. So that's another factor. It's generally our straightforward, blunt, direct, no nonsense. They like order. They might cause chaos, but they don't like chaos. They like to impose order and their own sense of order in particular. They like their own lives to be orderly the way they like it. So they'll sit down and move things around to suit themselves and so on. Like all the gut types can do that.
Yeah, the 8s thrive in order, even though they're chaotic. Yeah,
kind of.
Example.
Like a bull, almost like a bull in a china shop would be the way it could be.
So that's why they sent Trump to military school. He thrived.
Yeah. So compare a type 7 or a counterphobic 6. Those are types that can actually create chaos for the sake of chaos and so on. But if an 8 creates chaos, it's more like as a consequence of trying to establish their own order in their own lives. You will get more withdrawn introverted extroverts who are 8s, but they're not as obvious over the top as Trump. So with the 8s, I don't think Biden's an 8. Sabrina. I think Biden's kind of a 2 actually. With type 8s, a big thing for them is justice and fairness, and particularly a subjective sense of justice and fairness. They do not like to be treated unfairly, and they don't like it when other people are treated unfairly as they see it. And they're very often the first person to step in and act to correct injustice, whether or not it was appropriate, however. And whether or not they can certainly overlook injustice that they don't think is injustice, however, and they can be unjust. They don't distinguish so much between justice and retribution or revenge. The thing is, with the Ace are vengeful but not vindictive. So for them, it's like getting even. It's like getting even. It's like, you're on me, I got you back, now we're even, we're done. So they're not the type to like get revenge and then still feel unsatisfied, and they still have to hurt you again and again and again, unless they really don't like you. Generally, if they get revenge, that's it. And if they have to keep getting revenge, they'll just cut you out of your life, cut you out of their life, sorry, and pretend you don't exist. Yeah,
the bad promoter is the one that has to get revenge, super revenge.
Yeah, but also ESTJs and ENTJs and stuff.
The ENTJs typically don't. I mean, you can have again the negative aspect.
Well, the veggies isn't always obvious.
Health too.
The veggies isn't always obvious. Like, again, for them, it's like getting even. That's what it is. It's not necessarily like they're going to go and punch someone. It could be like just being done with someone, or punish them in some way. So what the aides need from a teacher is that teacher is strong and can stand up to them, and is truthful and direct and honest, and doesn't treat people unfairly. So Catherine, I'll bring Catherine forward back again. She's identified as an 8, and she, in the class that she recently talked about when she was a child, she had this teacher who was tenured, and he kind of abused his authority. He would give people a test. If they made the slightest mistake, he'd give them an F. And she got tired of him doing that. She stood up to him and said, "You can't do that. That's not fair." And he said, "Yes, I can," and so on. And eventually she said, "I'm going to see the principal." She brought the principal into it, and the principal didn't want to deal with this because this teacher is tenured and she can't do much about it. Eventually her parents were called, and her mother was an anxious, shy 4 and didn't want to deal with it. Her father, however, was another 8, socially, and when he heard what happened, he said, "Damn right, she did the right thing. That teacher's all the crap." They both agreed that an injustice was being done and that something had to be done about it. I don't know what happened afterwards, but that's a common thing with an 8. Like, if an 8 sees an injustice, they want to do something about it. Again, what exactly they consider an injustice and what everyone else considers an injustice isn't always as clear cut as an abusive teacher. It could be that they feel like parents punish them unjustly, or they feel like they're being wronged and someone's insulting them when they didn't mean it, or whatever.
Okay. So, question for Sabrina. Cognitive task analysis, what is that?
Cognitive test analysis is when you give students, and we do this as teachers all the time, a concept or a task, and then they have to in turn prioritize those and break them down. For example, if I said to you guys, all right, we are going to teach the kindergarten students how to use a computer. What is it that you need to know how to use a computer? Well, what are the steps that it takes to learning how to use a computer? What is it that you're going to teach them? So basically they take and they analyze the skills, they analyze the processes, and then they in turn pull together the steps in order to turn it into something that's usable. Now, we do cognitive task analysis, I think, on a daily basis within our jobs once we've been in it for a while in terms of prioritizing our day. This is just one way academically or in a classroom where students can learn that process, and also they get credit for it. You know, it can be a really good, helpful tool.
So what do you give the student? What you say you gave them a cognitive task analysis. So you give them the analysis?
It would be in most cases it's more of a project or an assignment where,
okay,
like I said, there's something that we need to do. Now we have to decide, how are we going to get there? It's kind of beginning with the end in mind. We need to go to the store. That's another example. What are the things that we need to go to the store?
Okay.
Well, what are we going to do when we get to the store?
Okay, so
what's our budget when we get to the store? It allows them to think of all of the pieces and the parts of the tasks that it takes to get a job done. And that being part of the learning process, not simply, I'm going to tell you how to get to the store. This is what you need. Now let's go do it. It's let us all think together about all of the things that we need to do. So again, and this is, with this kind of student, given that they like to have control and independence, this is definitely something that can let them also see the bigger picture and the little picture all in one.
Gotcha.
Well, I will say that it's actually.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. It's actually identified with the bigger picture. They can see it. They don't see the details so much. Well, I suppose in the ESTJ may, but generally, it's see themselves as big picture people, and the other people miss it. It's also don't like weakness, and they don't respect it. They have to be a good thing with an A is to explain to them that they want to toughen other people up. They want people to toughen up and just want to take a joke of stuff. If you explain to them that other people aren't like that and other people really can't learn and really have to play that, then they'll generally understand and they'll feel the need to protect those people, because they can be very protective and protect the vulnerable, or who they see as vulnerable. And they don't see themselves as the underdog, but they can fight for the underdog. Eights are also low anxiety and generally don't have much fear. They're not necessarily fearless, but they certainly have less fear than other types, and they don't mind a challenge. That's where the word challenger comes from. They also, their defense is denial, and that means denying their weaknesses and denying problems. If a type 8 is at the gym, for example, they may hit their limit and go into denial and then keep on going, push themselves past their limit, try and overcome it. So as far as most days will enjoy sports and enjoy pushing themselves. Eights are usually quite physical. Even if they don't, though, they'll still like competition and challenges and overcoming the odds and so on. It says they're preparing the practical to the theory, but obviously that does depend a bit on the Jungian type, the Myers-Briggs type, whatever. But they do like to have results and concrete results, and they do like action and doing things. So generally, what they want is the ability to be themselves, to say what they want, and so on. But they also benefit from being told that other people they do have to be careful of other people, because other people are not going to toughen up the way they want them to. It's just not going to happen. They don't see themselves as bullies, but other people might see them as bullies. They see themselves as the person fighting the bullies and the other ones stopping them. Generally, others try to understand what they see as just and unfair, and make sure that it's on the same level as what you are, and also be consistent, be fair, be tough, be able to endure their things, and be able to stand up to them, but don't push them and don't get in their face or anything. Just know when to lay down the law and know when to let them speak their mind and know when they're being truthful. Bear in mind, although A's do see themselves as truthful, they also don't mind telling white lies or exaggerating in order to get a project going or getting things on board. I think Trump had a term for that, and I can't remember what it was, but it was basically if he has a project, or if any has a project or something they want to get done, they can kind of exaggerate how they can downplay the bad odds and play up the good odds, and exaggerate the likelihood of this happening. And their logic is, well, if it's unlikely and we try, we might get it done. If it's likely and we don't do anything, it's not going to get done at all. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the presidents were these ETP, the TPs, I guess, in some sense. Like Kennedy, Johnson, Bush.
Kennedy's considered a 7. Obviously an EP. Johnson's considered an 8. Teddy Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt, they were both the same person. Both of the Roosevelts were considered 8s. Andrew Jackson was considered an 8. And Trump is always considered an 8.
Yeah. the promoters and the inventors are these guys. typical of them.
So I've had a handful of students who are 8s, and they've come to me usually between elementary and middle school, not because they're problem kids, but because they're, I guess, like with the challenging aspect, and their parents and teachers are not quite sure what to do with them, even if they may be doing well in school. They're like, well, what else should we do, because there are these things amiss? And I actually have a very compassionate view for these students, because I find they are the most capable to be guided towards being independent learners, with things like, like Sabrina mentioned with the cognitive task analysis, you give them something like, hey, here's, we need to fill, a month worth of lessons, or this is your learning objective. How can we get there? Because a lot of times they will start off with a complaint about what's going on in the classroom or what someone else wants them to do. So having them say what they see as valuable and then start to outline that can help them see too where some of the holes are in there, because they see themselves as equal, which is, I think, definitely a hard thing for a parent or a teacher when a 10-year-old's coming to them and presenting their ideas as an equal. And what I found is that they need to have that accepted, like, okay, you have that idea, great. What does it look like if we start outlining that, if we start putting that to use? How should you be evaluated? And then, like Jonathan mentioned, they can tend to see that they want self-control, but they don't see that the other people in their lives, and that means them controlling them. And then if they have that negative view, and this is something I've had to point out to them with other people, I'm like, if they don't respect you as an authority figure, they're not going to follow you. Like, what would you need to do to be able to get other people on board so that you can move forward with this thing? So I found that that is a totally different conversation than those students are typically getting in their classroom, which is why they're in a bit of this lost state, even though they're technically doing okay. So I felt like these are the students that I've had the most troubled parents. So parents just very confused, and I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Like, we're gonna they could jump a grade level very easily, or be that student taking the college courses outside of school, if they're guided in the right way, though, so that they start to understand other people's points of view. Encourage them to pull their peers, and stuff like that.
I just have a quick comment from, I remember Dario said about an advice for EST, for if you've got somebody who's got ESTP preferences, so resembles a promoter or artisan, that when you want to talk to them, you need to tell them, it's best to tell them before what the purpose of the conversation is. And I wondered, Christen, have you found that to be the case with ENTJ and ESTJ preference kids as well?
I think ESTJ kids tend to blend in with expectations more so. I said most of the challengers I've had are ENTJ, ENFJ, but they do it nicer, and ENTP.
So what do you think, Karen? So do you think, Jonathan, do you think an ENF, because somebody made the comment, I think Fate made the comment in the comments, about what about an ENFJ 8? Is that sort of incompatible because they're out of touch with the feelings, the 8? Oops, he disappeared.
That was a difficult question, so he disappeared.
Wow.
I mean, it does seem like a misfit on the surface, but I think maybe I'm wanting to be...
I don't know what happened there.
Oh, well, here's, yeah.
So, yeah, ENFJs are not likely to be core-ace, but it's quite common for ENFJs to be in the tri-type. That's what I would say.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's not that with 8s, it's not that they're out of touch with their feelings, it's that they're out of touch with their soft feelings. 8s feel like
more tough-minded.
Yeah, 8s actually, when they're very young, they usually feel free and can do what they want until they learn that they can't. The 8s will usually have a memory of, adult 8s will usually have a memory of a time when they were 6 or 7 or something, and there was an injustice, and that taught them that the world is not a fair place and they have to fight for what they want. That injustice could be something serious, or it could be something fairly mundane, like they feel like the teacher treated them unfairly, or they feel like they were punished unjustly, or whatever. Whatever it is, it sticks in their mind, and it teaches them that they're going to have to fight for what they want to get ahead in life. Another thing I want to mention is that it's 8, 9, and 1 are part of the gut center. That's also the anger center. So 8's attitude to anger is that they're fine with it. They're okay with it. They don't like being angry, but they're okay with being angry. The anger is natural and normal. Right. And the types that really, really like being angry are usually the phobic 6s or the more aggressive 4s. So if you've got a kid that's like really angry all the time or seems over the top and aggressive, that's usually not an 8. An 8 is normally nonchalant, but 8s are comfortable with anger. They're not necessarily going to be angry for the sake of it, but they're fine with it.
The INTP, right? That's like me, and especially me, is I really feel uncomfortable with my anger. Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that'll be the next one.
Dave, how was your father different? Because he was like seriously toughened up by the Great Depression and the war, and also like he was dealing with those like juvenile delinquents. So was he like
his brother was a
very much the promoter, yes.
ESFP, a performer. But
I thought his brother was promoter artisan rather than performer.
No, he was a performer. You just you got to remember this is in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Right, tough times.
There's tough times, and the performers can be really tough. Well, and even let's take this. Even I have my grandfather. My grandfather on my mother's side, he was an ESFJ or a provider guardian.
Yep.
But he survived the depression, right? Those people in those times, you got to be tough.
I think Tito, and I think your website, codes.com, typed Khrushchev as a performer artisan. Oh, yeah. I think Tito was a performer artisan. Like he would have Hollywood stars on his yacht. The leader of former Yugoslavia.
Good question. I'm not sure about Tito. I don't know.
There's an interesting thing. It's very interesting to compare this type, the type 8, with the counterphobic 6. And there was a certain Austrian leader of Germany, I don't wish to mention his name because it's bad for the YouTube algorithm, that Jonathan and I typed as a counterphobic 6, ENFJ teacher idealist. Yeah. And so it might be somebody who you might think, this person might be an ENFJ 8. No, it's probably a counterphobic 6.
Or even a 2 could be quite a 2 actually could be quite militant and assertive as well. So I do bear in mind that 8s aren't necessarily, like I said, they're not necessarily overtly aggressive. They can be aggressive, but they're not nonchalant. And some can be quite, depending on the tri-type, some can appear quite warm and friendly. Yeah, like a friendly bear. But
the when you go back farther and farther, you got to understand the culture and the
culture plays a part as well.
A German idealist is not the same as an American idealist or a Chinese idealist.
Or an Italian mastermind rational, a little bit more expressive than say a British mastermind rational.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Italian versus or whatever.
I've seen that real life. I do
want to say,
go on, Sabrina.
Going back to the cognitive task analysis with this type in particular, given that they have a natural, they're naturally inclined to be leaders, go-getters, assertive, direct, that type of activity gets them to think about other people without necessarily saying that that's what you're doing. It takes them out of themselves. If you feel that you are ready to to rule the world or rule your domain. Ultimately, you're going to have to deal with people, and you're going to have to hopefully deal fairly or justly. And one way to do that is to learn how to think about all of the different things. And since they do prefer the theory, the practical to the theory in general, and although they, as Jonathan said, they may see themselves as big picture people, this is one way, again, to tie the two together.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's see. Well, we have 9 and 1 to get through.
Okay, let's
Well,
go.
they see themselves. I'll say that ACT himself is cutting through the crap, cutting through the bull SHIT. So that's what I mean by big picture as well, and also because they're naturally quite strong, and strength is actually an important aspect of being intellectual, I find, because if you're not strong enough to question ideas and your own ideas, whatever, then you can have a hard time accepting that you're wrong, right? Or whatever. Ace can have a hard time accepting they're wrong as well, but that's more of a pride issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 9, the peacemaker. There are 2 ways of spreading the light: to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. Now, the peacemaker considers themselves to be calm, easygoing, and optimistic. Their core desire is being at peace and harmony, and the core fear is being separated from or at loss with others.
Yeah. So briefly, I'm going to whip in here real quick. Edith Wharton, I consider a teacher idealist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So 9s, like I said, is the one part of the gut center, which includes anger. None of the types these 3 types, 8, 9, and 1, like being angry. None of them identify as angry people, generally speaking. But the 8 is the one that's the most comfortable with anger. The 9 and the 1 are less comfortable. The 9 suppresses anger, whereas the 1 represses anger, and the 8 expresses anger, as I say it. So with the 9, anger makes them uncomfortable. All the gut types like comfort, but the 9 really likes being comfortable to the point of indolence at times, where they're avoiding problems and they're avoiding conflicts in order to keep the peace, and in particular keeping their own peace, their internal sense of peace. So they can go along to get along. They can go along with people that perhaps should or shouldn't. They can sometimes feel like, it can sometimes seem to others that they don't stand up for themselves, although the 9 is actually in some ways the strongest type. It's just a passive type. It's strong like a powerful herbivore. Like if you think of an elephant or a rhinoceros or a hippo or a bison, whatever, those are generally peaceful animals that you do not want to provoke. You don't want to get them angry because they will destroy you. Generally, the 9's an introvert. Core 9s are generally most types of introvert. And if you have an extrovert that is 9, the triad type, that will generally make them a little bit more introverted and passive. ESFPs, generally, if an extrovert has 9 the triad type, they'll be an extrovert with feeling. So ESFJs, ENFPs especially, is not that uncommon. But some of the thinkers, I'd say the ESTJ and the ENTJ are the least likely to have 9 the triad type, and maybe the ESTP. Yeah, but that's another topic. So generally, the 9s are adaptive, they're positive, they like to look for the silver lining and avoid problems, pretend things are okay, and they are withdrawn. I've said that the 4 and the 5 withdraw from the gut into the heart and the head, respectively. The 9 withdraws into the gut, into the body, away from the heart and the head. So imagine someone who feels uncomfortable, but rather than leaving and going to the room, they stay and they just check out mentally and emotionally. They're just staying there and smiling and nodding and going along. There's a good, if you remember there's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer Simpson, who's a self-pres 9 or a self-pres 7 with 9. There's an episode where he's having a conversation and his brain tells him this is you've just messed up, whatever, I'm out of here. And his brain just floats away like a ghost. And Homer's just going, yeah, just nodding along. So that's what the 9's kind of doing. They might grumble and complain at times, especially the self-present 9, the self-present 9 with 8. But they are enduring. They're actually very good with tedious work. They're not the type to complain overtly. They're not the type to go up to the teacher complain. They might grumble. They might. Usually, if they complain, it's a genuine complaint in the moment. To no one in particular, just venting frustration. They're actually, if they're left to their own devices, they'll just go about their normal routine and just do their daily stuff without thinking too much about it. They actually benefit from being around more stronger, more powerful, or pushier personalities that will push them to do things, and they can be attracted to that within reason. At the same time, if you really touch a value or something they feel strong about, they can be very stubborn and be immovable. Like a lot of hardcore pacifists, like Gandhi, for example, I consider to be he sometimes types a 1, I consider him to be a 9. It's really that power of just passive resistance and endurance that makes the 9 work to be a 9 with 1. If they get really angry, they could actually shout and scream and sometimes even get violent. It's something they feel they can't control. It just comes out, and that's usually when they're pushed to the limit. But generally, they're someone who is uncomfortable with anger and tries to maintain the peace. It can also be that person who, when they do feel angry, there's a partner that likes it because they're finally pushing themselves and getting off their chest. But at the same time, generally, they like that happy, comfortable, stress-free lifestyle. You see a tranquility. So they're really a teacher who is able to maintain a fairly friendly, peaceful atmosphere, but also knows how to motivate them and push them and get them to join in. And they benefit from being around other kids and other students who get them to join in as well and who will push them in the right direction. Okay.
Will this be similar to the 4 in being very careful about any criticism, especially for it to not seem personal?
Well, what do you mean the 4's careful about criticism?
We had on the 4 that they are very sensitive.
Yeah, the 4 doesn't like being criticized for being authentic or authentic, whatever. Some 4's can be very critical of others, but they don't like, and they're the 4's trying to avoid shame by aggressive 4's are trying to avoid shame by shaming others preemptively, and they like shame to be something they're nostalgic about. The 9, I mean, none of the times like being criticized. The 9 kind of put up with criticism if it's fair, as long as it's not done too much. Some 9s could be at risk of being victims of bullies because they're just not standing up for themselves. They don't like the image of someone who doesn't stand up for themselves. They don't like being seen that way, but they can definitely be that way. But they can always be that person who's pushed and pushed and pushed and eventually just lashes out and punches the wall or shouts whatever or throws over the table. That's if they're pushed far enough. It's like they're suppressing their anger for the sake of maintaining the peace, and so sometimes the anger can build up over time. But generally speaking, they're conflict avoidant. Some more than others, as I always say. But
and Sabrina, what does the scaffolding look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Sabrina?
Sabrina?
Yeah.
We're curious about.
Yeah, you're muted, Sabrina.
Yeah,
you know what? I was looking at the comments and I was chuckling to myself. I apologize. So you were asking about scaffolding?
Yeah.
So scaffolding is taking and chunking activities or projects into little bits so that they're digestible by the student, and making that, and it would evolve a little bit of, I guess you could say, some of your cognitive task analysis, but essentially it's very Piagetian. If I have something and I am worried about throwing it out to the kids the way that maybe a 7 would love, this particular group doesn't want that. They want it in chunks. This is the big picture, but this is what we're going to work on. And then what we're going to work on here is going to build on the next part. And then we can put those two things together and see how we do on that. And then we slowly build up very, very concrete to abstract. But again, breaking each part of that into a chunk so that, like I said, so that it's digestible by the student.
Okay. Question. This is off topic, but reminded me. Did Hattie do any with Montessori's methods, or did they?
I can share with you if you would like to see that. Well, let's see. Hold on one second. Let me make sure.
Well, you can do this offline. You can do that offline.
Yeah, I can see. I will send you the link. I'll send you a link. And he has a visual learning website that's wonderful, because you can see the chart. Then there's also the table that breaks it down. But I want to say he may not say Montessori the same way that he says Piagetian, but if you look at the different techniques, they're Montessorian techniques.
Gotcha.
So I'll definitely share that with you.
Okay.
All right, to our one.
Well, is there any comments about 9 first, like, or 9 students?
I actually can't recall any.
I will say 9 is considered either the most common or second most common type, so you probably do have a lot of 9s. Probably
I did
or not.
Notes, and I see one.
Yeah.
Who, along the lines of immersion and experiential, I found that in giving him freedom to choose reading assignments, chose quite a few like historic events, and then that interested him. And then for reading, found memoirs from that time period or people who lived at that time. So he got pretty into fully understanding historical events in that way, like not just compiling research, but also, like I said, with the memoirs and first person perspective.
Yeah, Nines are good at seeing different points of view, regardless of their Myers-Briggs type.
Yeah,
in terms of merging with someone else, and just immersing themselves point of view. So, in the Enneagram, they're considered. If you look at the Enneagram symbol, 8s, 9s, and 1s at the top. 9s are considered kind of like a transcendent type. They can go to all levels because they can see the points of view of each of the types, and they can kind of get lost in it. They can be more aware. They can sometimes have trouble seeing themselves in them because they can see a bit of themselves in each and every type. So
yeah, well, in fact,
again, they can be.
Give you an example of me. So I don't value any of this stuff except the learning style of immersion. So I actually know a lot about history. So that's what I would. So I've decided that based on you guys, I finally figured the Enneagram stuff. It took me maybe 10, 15 years. Of course, I was not that interested, but now I am a 5-4-9.
Okay.
So the 9 is because of my mom. She was a teacher idealist, and I definitely got immersion. Immersion was the big thing with me.
Yeah. So they like to immerse themselves in activities. They can or another person's agendas, perhaps. They can fall asleep to themselves. That's an issue with Nays. They don't necessarily know what they want. They'll just go on with what other people want. And so they have to, in a way, they can benefit from being provoked to anger, because that can, once you find out what angers them, you get a sense of what they value. even though they don't like being angry. Some 9s can have problems with alcohol or drugs, whatever, just because they're, especially anything that tranquilizes them, making them fall asleep. 9s will also, a lot of 9s will, especially with self-pres, they'll have like bedtimes that they have to be in bed at a certain time, regardless of everyone else does. Some 9s with an 8 wing will say that they were more aggressive when they were younger. That often depends on who they're hanging out with and what values being crossed. Generally, left to their own devices, they're quite peaceable. But do bear in mind they are the strongest type, even if they don't show it.
Then you asked about an ISFJ E9, and I'm pretty sure one of my first students was, who was also explosively angry. I found out in shock one day. It was, over a math problem. And I think that's actually the first time he was really like, I mean, after a few months, like of exploring and trying different things, really to put into words what it was that he was finding difficult with the particular thing. And I'm not sure that that would have happened in a straight educational environment, because with that student, I was in home with his siblings. So it was 3 of us at a time at home. So there's a comfort level there. There's also like chores that need to be done in the background. So there was a lot going on that got to that point where, you know, he got like just explosively frustrated. And I feel like that burst a bit of a bubble after that, that then he was able to express values afterwards, but definitely valued tranquility and peace overall, and the routine and the predictability.
Yeah, I have an amusing story for myself. So I was never seen as angry, but one time I was in the car and I was young, and I was really angry. And I was trying to convince my parents that I was angry. And my mother was laughing at me.
Yeah.
I said, I'm really angry. I'm really angry.
Yeah. What were you angry about?
I don't remember. It's just that I was angry at my parents for whatever.
That's actually another thing.
Frustrated. So, you know, I never said, people, you know, obviously, people would say, well, you're angry. And I'd say, no, you're angry. And finally, I figured out after about 50 years, I said, no, I'm frustrated. Yeah, okay. That's our anger. That's my anger, you know, being a 5, 4, 9, you know, that's my frustration.
Okay. Another thing with 9s is forgetfulness. They can forget things that they find uncomfortable. Because they'd be absent-minded. That's a 9ish thing. And also, I mentioned about some 9s get a problem with alcohol and tranquilizer and stuff. Even repetition and routine and all these things, in a way, that's another form of, it's along a similar line. It's like a more constructive form of drug in a way, because it's a more constructive way of falling asleep to themselves, doing repetitive tasks over and over again.
Mm-hmm. The Guardians would be that way.
Well, even some other types can do that.
Too. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like just enjoying, losing yourself in something can be a good way to do it. Yeah. So we better go on to one because I'm bursting for the bathroom.
Well, wait a minute. I'll just say something about, so when you're typing somebody, so in Kersey temperament model, we've got this thing called the interaction mode. So we call them all modus operandi. So you got, if you're informing and reserved, you've got this responsive accommodation. And the thing is, the E9 is also accommodative. So if someone's, say, a counselor or idealist and they're an E9, it can sometimes be trickier to diagnose their type, or categorize them rather, if you maybe have to look deeper to see if, because there might be more directive in a subtle way, because the E9 can make them look accommodative. Also, an example of, say, this is from sociology, so the harmonizing subtype. So David, you once did an offline event with Elena, and she would be like, and you typed her as a mastermind. she thought she was a counsel idealist.
Right.
But if Victor eventually convinced that she was like his equivalent of the mastermind, he calls the type the critic, and it's just that she's like harmonizing subtype, and so it's like if someone's a 9 or harmonizing, it can make them sometimes look like a feeling type, more of a soft-hearted type. So again,
also Elena, was Austrian or was she the Finnish? I can't.
Ukrainian.
So that's another factor, right?
She did the interpreting in the Dario and Victor video on January 30th, and I think you watched that event.
Right.
So over to Jonathan for the best type, the perfect type.
Oh yeah, we're going to be
Perfect. Oh dear.
Jonathan's type.
So you consider yourself? No, you're a 1. Oh, okay, 1, 5, 2. Okay.
Yeah.
And we've got both of them here because Christen
the best
also.
type.
Sabrina.
Oh, okay. So Christen is a 1.
Okay. Well,
one,
type
6,
1, the
2,
reformer.
okay.
Success doesn't come. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, go,
Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. Type 1, the reformer, responsible, dependable, respects authority. Their core desire is being good and being right, and core fear is being bad and being wrong.
That respects authority sounds more of like a 6, actually. There's something, some of these can be confused with a 6. Type 1s and type A's both own their own authority. They both see themselves as authoritative, and they like to be authoritative. So type 1s and type A's can actually respect each other in a sort of mutual strength sort of way. They can both see each other as kind of strong. An example of a type 1 or a type 6 in regards to authority in the classroom would be both the 6 and the 1 might see another kid breaking the rules or being disruptive, and they both might tell the teacher. However, the 6 is thinking, if I don't tell, I'll get in trouble. Whereas the 1 is thinking, teacher, this is your job. You have to take care of this. I can't punish. I'm not allowed to punish them because I'm just another student. If I could tell them off, I would. But they're not going to listen to me. So you have to do it. The teacher becomes the instrument of my own authority. That's what the 1's thinking.
So you're saying 1 takes it into their own hands a little more than the other?
Yes. 1's very much. Even if the 1 is filing a report or whatever, or complaining to teacher or whatever, it's more like that's just the procedure. That's how it goes. It's not a matter of avoiding blame. It's just a matter of knowing that correcting them by themselves probably won't get them anywhere. They don't mind correcting others, but if they won't be listened to, they'll go through the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So type 1s are generally any of the J type. Any of the J types tend to be 1. So the 1 is compliant, meaning dutiful and rule-bound. Competent, meaning they're trying to be objective, and idealistic, so they have an ideal sense of how things should be. But they're sometimes called a perfectionist, but it's particularly the moral perfectionist. All the types can be perfectionists in their own way. The type 1 is really a morally focused, principled person. There's a strong sense of morality and objective morality and objective justice, a sense of right, a moral sense of right and wrong. They are generally trying to be responsible in their own, and they have their own particular standards and rules. They can hold others to a high standard, but they hold themselves to an even higher standard. So they're, however hard they seem to be on others, they're almost always harder on themselves. Other types can think they're like that, but the 1s are the most actually like that. They're constantly criticizing them. They have an inner critic and inner judge. They criticize themselves for every single thing they say or do, or should have done this, should have done that. They're always strong to the word should and shouldn't. They repress their anger, and they repress inappropriate emotions. So it's not like the 9 that is avoiding anger because they see things as uncomfortable. The one is avoiding anger because they see it as corrupting or irrational, both irrational and immoral. Basically, they try and they're aware that anger can be bad. Anger can be harmful and dangerous. They basically take anger and stop it at the checkpoint and push it down. However, anger is like a weapon to be brought out in times of injustice. However, like the nine, they can kind of enjoy letting go of anger at times, but generally they see anger as something that causes problems and that has to be brought out at appropriate moments, which can be frustrating for other types that are more free with their anger. Generally, they have certain rigidity to it. There's a kind of conflict with the one where part of them is quite traditional and conservative and rule-bound, but there's other part that wants to provoke change and change rules and improve things, make things better. And ones do have a side that want to have fun, like go and cut loose and so on, but that's usually more like a side to them. It's more like a serious person with a fun and silly side, and that's when they're healthy, rather than a naturally fun and silly person. So someone who enjoys having fun and letting go, but generally feels like doing that too much is irresponsible. It's very much responsibility, very much about a sense of honor. Eights have their own sense of honor, but ones are generally both following rules, but they have their own standards as well. It's like they're looking for roles that align with their values and looking for peers and align with their values. They can be quite picky with who they spend time with and what they want to do, and they don't have a problem saying no. I think a good thing to say is this with the gut types is what they mean by no, the word no. So with an eight will say no just as a knee-jerk reaction. If you ask an eight to do something, they'll say no. And if you ask them again, they may say okay, because no was just a knee-jerk reaction. Whereas with a nine will say yes when they mean maybe, and maybe when they mean no. So nines will avoid saying no even when they mean no. A one is the most straightforward. If a one says yes, they mean yes. If a one says maybe, they mean maybe. If they say no, they mean no. That's generally how the one's thinking. So, yeah, ones like the eight, in other times they want the teacher to be fair and consistent and know what they're talking about. They want a certain level of independence. They also want to know what the rules are and what's expected of them in this task. They can be very much the type of person who does the same thing over and over again, kind of like the three and getting it right, except with the three is the image of perfection, but the one is actually getting it right. It's like the one gets that little endorphin kick, that little feeling of immense satisfaction when things align perfectly, when all the dominoes fall correctly, when everything lines up. That's what the one likes, that sense of satisfaction. That's what motivates them. So they will almost always fall short of their standards in some way, but that's only because their standards are so high. But they're trying to get as good as they can. And this will be in that sense of perfection could be in lots of different aspects of their life. Like I like to have my books all in a proper order, for example, or if I'm playing a video game or something, do the same level over and over and over again just to get it done a certain way. Not even the way it's supposed to be done, just the way I want it to be done. But primarily, it's a moral thing. Very much the way to being moral and principled people. And trying to avoid being corrupt. They don't actually... A lot of ones don't actually like people who are too puritanical, because those are usually 4s or 6s with the ones in the tri-type, that exaggerated puritanism. The ones will find that a bit too restrictive and it's like an extra standard upon them, but too stressful. But they do hold themselves to high standard. They do try and they expect others to be held to that standard as well, although everyone will fall short. So
okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
For Sabrina, teacher clarity, what does that mean?
What was that?
Teacher clarity.
Teacher clarity? Teacher clarity, very concrete.
Very concrete. Okay.
The teacher being extremely clear and concrete about expectations versus, we'll let you make a decision. They want to know very much STJ.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
And it's funny because I just saw that Ben showed that the ISTJ is one of the common types. And it's interesting because as we were looking through some of the resources for this, teacher clarity of instructions is actually what that is about. And I thought, yeah, that makes perfect sense now that he's elaborated on the type even more.
Right.
Well, just to keep in mind, ones are the ones will say that they're the ones that clarify. They want things to be clear, but they're also the ones who clear things up. Ones can definitely be self-motivated. So the ones don't necessarily need to be told what to do for the sake of it. They need to be told what to do as far as they want to know what's expected of them in this moment. They want to know what's expected of them regarding this task or this project. If they're left to their own devices, they will generally not have a problem working hard with what interests them or what they think is important. They will have areas of their life where they are letting things go, like some ones will have a messy room, for example, or something like that. But some area where they can just not care. But the things they think they're important, they really do take seriously, and they really do hold themselves to high standards. They expect others to be held to that standard if they're performing in that task or that field, which is, again, especially if it's a moral area.
Yeah. So it's because Christen is a 1-2, you are a 1-4. So it'd be interesting to look at the 2 again. Because I can't remember these things.
Well, I'm a 1-5-2, and she says she's a 1-6-2. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, when I look at 1, as I was thinking about this, I said 1 is definitely, I'm thinking 5,
Okay.
1, 3 for me when I look at my behavior, but I've got to go back and look at the heart again.
Right. So 1, okay. You both are 1-2s. Gotcha. But she's a 6 and you're a 5. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the one with 5, more introverted, one more capable of independent thought and research. So it's not quite as rule bound, but still rule bound. Actually, a 1 with 5 and a 5 with 1 can be more of a loner than a 5 with 9 or whatever, because the 1 is very picky with who they spend time with, and so on. So the 5 wants to be alone, and the 1 might want to be with people, but they want to specify with this. So if they can't find anyone meeting their standards,
so you're more 1-5, kind of almost 4. So you might. Would you consider yourself a 1-4 something or other?
No, a 1-5-2 in that order as well. So
right, but
I do have that positivity in that the 1-5-2 is an interesting combination because the 5 wants to be alone, but the 2 definitely wants to be with people. In my case, the 5 wins out, and there's that shyness and that complex loneliness.
Okay.
But also positivity and ease of helping.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the 1-5-2 is a tri-type, whereas if you say 1-4-4-2 is not a tri-type, basically.
No.
Great. Gotcha.
Yeah, because again, 2 and 4 are kind of variations of the same core type.
Yeah, from an Enneagram point of view. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Jonathan, are all Enneagram type 1s directive? So, in the Kersey temperament model, NJs and STs are directive, although maybe STP is less likely to be E1.
Yeah, SJs. Yeah, type 1s can definitely be directive. Type 1s, as I said, they're the ones who enforce the rules and make the rules and direct people and tell people what to do and correct people and so on, how to do things. It's not just that they want you to do things; it's they want you to do things in the correct way,
right?
To their standards, whatever those standards are. So the difference between a 1 with 5 and a 1 with 6 is the 1 with 6 is a bit more conforming, a bit more aware of what's expected of them, a bit more, bit less introverted, a bit more capable of fitting in a bit.
Yeah.
And the 1 with 7 is a bit more cult-loose and free spirited and so on.
Right.
The thing with the image types, the heart types, that's a bit more important with the 1, because I keep saying the 1 is a moral person. The heart type will kind of impact what their morals are. So all the 1s want to, they'll have an ethic. A type 1 with 2 will have a kind of a warmth ethic, like a helping ethic.
Oops.
No, a warmth ethic, a helping ethic, an ethic around helping others and being helpful. Whereas the 1 with 3 is more of a work ethic, like I have to work hard, I have to be competent and efficient, a bit more robotic. Actually, 3s can, I never mentioned this, but 3s can identify with being robots because they're just being very efficient. And the 1 with 4 is more like an authenticity ethic. So the 1 with 4 will be generally the one that most sticks to their principles, sometimes beyond the point of reason. Like all 1s want to stick to their principles, but they also have that, they don't want to stick for the principles just for the sake of pride, like, because that would be a bad thing, it'd be a corrupting thing. The 1s will have this conflict over the morally right thing to do and the pragmatic thing to do. And the tri-type will kind of impact on which one's out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was first learning Enneagram, I really liked this graphic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit simplistic, I think. Yeah. Another thing is, I mentioned that 1, 3s, and 5s are all competent types, so they all try and be objective. And they all see themselves as rational and logically resistant, or they're trying to be.
Yes.
But I would say that type 1s are actively rational, whereas type 5s are passively rational. Type 5s are more willing to take their rationality for granted a bit. Type 1s know that they're gut types. Type 1s know that they start with a strong, irrational gut sense, a strong, just instinctive sense of right and wrong. This is right, this is wrong. Can't explain it. I just know it is. So they're using rationality to figure it out. So they're trying to. 1s know that they're not inherently rational people, but they're trying to be. They want things to be as rational as possible, and they want to know if their sense of right and wrong is correct or not, and they want the logic to align with their sense of right and wrong as much as possible.
So interesting there. So where'd this come from, the defense mechanisms?
One of my folders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Reaction.
Folders.
My wheels folder for the Enneagram graphics.
Okay.
So reaction formation for the 1, that means they're taking a bad emotion and turning it into something else.
Yes.
So like I feel angry, I stop it and I change it to something else.
Yeah, no, that's a classic Freudian, right? That's totally Freudian, right?
Yeah, this is primitive Freudian stuff.
Yeah, reaction formation.
Oh yeah, Dave. I think Jonathan said that there's been a lot of influence of Naranjo on the Enneagram and the psychology. Claudio Naranjo, a Chilean psychologist, psychiatrist, and Jonathan said that. Theorist. Yeah, guest school overlap with Kersey Senior, but Jonathan said that when he learnt his psychology, it was a little bit. He said it was some of the psychology had been sort of like proven less popular now, and it maybe was a bit dated?
Basically, Claudio Naranjo, he went to South America and studied with a guy called Chazo, who taught the predecessor of the Enneagram. The modern Enneagram is a lot heavily based on Naranjo's work. Naranjo is basically the guy who brought the Enneagram to America and refined it. And the Chazo, the guy who learned it from, was a spiritual teacher. Naranjo, though, is a trained psychiatrist, so he brought a lot more of the psychology to it. And he tried to validate the Enneagram as much as possible to European Enneagram.
Gotcha.
So basically, Naranjo was writing in the 70s and 80s, so he tried to validate the Enneagram and align it as much as possible with contemporary psychology theory. So he tried to show how the types related to Jungian type, for example, or how they related to the DSM and so on. And some of that proved to be a bit more outdated. But other Enneagram practitioners, some of whom were also psychologists, came along and refined it further, and they're always updating it. So Naranjo passed away last year, or even earlier this year, I think. Quite recently.
Okay.
But
he's not the any of this stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But that's where some of the Freudian stuff comes from.
Yeah.
He was a trained psychologist.
Yeah, so if you want to look up those names, I think it's Dr. David Daniel. What is he? Someone at Stanford, like someone with a proper background.
Yeah, he also passed away, but he passed away first, actually. But he was David Daniel was a professor at Stanford. I think it was some other one was at Stanford. And basically, they vouched for Naranjo and said Naranjo didn't teach at Stanford properly, but he had short courses at Stanford where he taught some people.
I assume he had nothing to do with Haley and all that group, right? They probably didn't talk to each other.
Jay Haley, Jonathan.
Jay Haley and
never heard his name
Bateson and all that guy.
Yeah, I don't think so. Never heard their name associated with this.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, much like Myers-Briggs, a lot of actual professional psychologists were taught the Enneagram, liked it, and then refined it over the generations. So what Naranjo taught, he brought in Freudian stuff like this. Some of it's still there, but it's taught in a different manner, and the other stuff is refined.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I like how you call it Freudian, Jonathan.
No, this is Freudian. This is Freudian stuff. Those are Freudian.
No, I mean the pronunciation that you use rather than Freudian.
Freudian, whatever.
Yes, we love that. I think I told you before. It's so hard to understand you, even though my ancestors are Scottish. But I realized they're Irish, Scotch-Irish. So that we're both Celtic. But that's commonality.
Yeah, there's something I've got for you here. Now we mentioned the history. There's some of the history of the Enneagram, according to a 1990s book.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's the history of the symbol of the Enneagram. They've actually confused things. The Enneagram symbol is very ancient, but the actual theory of personality is only like the 60s or 70s. So
this guy might be worth looking up.
Started there. Okay.
Bit of a Russian mystic.
Right.
But Claudio Naranjo is the one who really invented the modern Enneagram as we know it, and he did write some books.
Gotcha.
It's just that some of his stuff's a bit out of date.
Gotcha.
And other stuff is supposed to be based on his work, but wasn't because of misunderstandings.
Yeah.
So
and someone we know. I mean, Jonathan's read Naranjo's work, and someone we know is about to read one of. So, Jonathan, which books do you recommend by Naranjo to read? Is the one about the one in neurosis? Is that one?
Character and Neurosis is the one I have. I haven't read any of the others. I think Character and Neurosis, again, is good for learning the history of the Enneagram and how Naranjo understood it. Not so much. It has problems if you're trying to understand the modern Enneagram. It is a bit simplistic, but it's good for the intellectual history of it.
Yeah, Beatrice Chestnut's book's good, if only because this is me going towards the authority. She is a proper psychotherapist, and so she's bringing in stuff from modern lessons.
Yeah, the thing with Enneagram is there are like different branches of teachers, so there's sometimes teach different things in different ways. A good one is Tom Condon. We had Tom Condon on these.
Yep.
His stuff's quite good, and his stuff about the instincts is quite good.
Yeah,
and of course Catherine Favre, who we have on. Well.
Yeah, the good thing about Tom Condon is I think he's probably a concrete type in Kersey temperament, maybe composer or crafter. And Catherine is very empirical. Whatever a Jungian type, she's very empirical. She looks at body language, she looks at the word usage, and she has all of this data over decades. And so she sort of takes out, because there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of like speculation with Enneagram. You can go a very speculative route because you're going right inside someone's mind and in a sometimes very specific and narrow way. That's very good for writing characters, I imagine, in novels.
Yes.
But Catherine's good on the empiricals in terms of these types use these words and have this body language.
Well, we'll probably tend to use these words, yeah.
Yeah. And she studied the Ekman's facial action coding system.
Okay.
So she has a background in for that.
Oh boy. Okay.
Right then. So should we stop recording? I mean, we can chat afterwards. Okay, we're going to stop recording, folks.
Cheerio.
Bye from me and bye from all these fantastic people. And we're back.